Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 157 of ThROH The Years, the podcast that reviews Ring of Honor show by show from the beginning. My name is Trevor Dame. I'm joined, as always, by the co-host of the show, Matt Feuerstein. Matt, you were just telling me about braving the cold. It's warm where I am. I'm the Canadian. You're the American. We're breaking preconceived notions. That was the original name for the show. It was Warm Side, Cold Side. It was just going to be more about people who have trouble sleeping together in beds.
Should we talk about the weather? Hi. Should we talk about the government? I mean, I'm guessing that our audience, because we're so old, our audience is mostly old enough to get that reference, but I'm guessing there are some kids out there that have no idea what I'm talking about. So I'll just let you sit with that and feel bad for being born too late.
Well, hopefully this show will warm you up, Matt, because we're going to jump right into it, I guess. It's the second half of a doubleheader, so we don't have any news between the shows. So we can just get into talking about Death Before Dishonor 5, Night 2, which took place August 11th, 2007, at the Pennsylvania National Guard Armory in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in front of a reported crowd of 800 fans.
Including yours truly.
You made now, how often did you go to Philly? Because obviously I know you went to a lot of the New York shows, but was Philly a regular occurrence to you, or was that more of a pick and choose or a rare thing?
In 06 and 07, I went to every Philly show. After that, I kind of stopped going. I think I went to one Philly show in 05. I wanted to go to the second night of the Kobashi, or I guess it was the afternoon show, second day of the Kobashi visit, but I had to work, so I only went to the New York show that time. But that was the only Philly show that I missed between July of 2005 and I guess whenever the first Philly show of 2008 was. I stopped going by then. So I was going regularly to Philly at this point.
Wow. Well, you lucky devil. The Observer wrote at the time, the weekend shows drew 550 in Roxbury, Massachusetts, which is near Boston, on August 10th. And he wrote here 900 on August 11th in Philadelphia. But then in the results section of the Observer, I believe he wrote 800, so I'm having to pick and choose here. So I guess I'm going to go 800. I could split the difference and go 850, but either way,
it was definitely one of those shows where, like, the summer of 2006 when they did Death Before Dishonor with the ROH versus CZW stuff, they had like two sides of pretty full bleachers. And this time, one of the bleachers, as you could see on the show, was not open. Like there was nobody really sitting in it. So it was definitely a lot less than the crowd they had for the previous year's Death Before Dishonor in Philly.
Well, I don't know if you remember what the show in Philly before this one looked like live.
Domination. I think this had a bigger crowd than that, if I remember correctly, yeah.
Dave wrote in the Observer, both of these shows, the attendances on this weekend, were both probably better than expected for those markets coming so soon after previous shows. So apparently this was viewed, at least by Dave, as a bit of a win for them, even though, like you said, nothing is reaching in Philly the peak of the CZW ROH feud. That was a huge hit for them in Philly. But and then always one of these fun notes you get. PW Insider wrote, former ROH champion Homicide was visiting in Philadelphia over the weekend before heading to a scheduled booking with Combat Zone Wrestling, which I looked up. He ended up wrestling that night. So it's always fun to see a wrestler who's like, I like these guys enough. I'm going to drop by just for a minute and say hi.
It's fun to see them hanging out. I mean, like, I saw Homicide hanging out at the 2300 arena when AEW was running there back in the late summer of 2025. So I guess he likes to go and hang at the shows. Actually, in 2009, when we get to the final countdown shows of Bryan Danielson and Nigel McGuinness at the Manhattan Center, Homicide, we were sitting near Homicide in the crowd for that one too. So he likes to go to these shows, it seems like, even to this day.
The best ones were that period where, like, you'd see it, where someone would sign with WWE, it was almost like they had to be in hiding, where you'd hear, like, oh, CM Punk was backstage at this show, like, in the year or two after ROH, but, he had to, like, I mean, not had to, but, you have to be a little more careful because there was that whole rigmarole about WWE would get mad about a lot of weird things
Yeah, yeah.
when it
Well,
came to indie
I think
wrestlers.
they still do.
Yeah.
But there was that famous photo, right, at Final Battle 2006, after Homicide won the title, backstage of Punk and Joe and Homicide taking a photo together, and that certainly made the rounds.
Yeah. And we also got two dark matches that obviously did not make DVD. That's why they're dark. Mitch Franklin and Pele Primo defeated Up in Smoke, Cheech and Cloudy, who were, enacted different. They had been in ROH as part of Special K before, but, they were as the Up in Smoke team. They had been around a little bit in, I think, Chikara and a bunch of other indies. So
A
they
lot
were
of
a fun little.
a lot of Special K reference or visitors on this particular night, I guess.
Yeah, and they were fun. I think my memory, Matt, keeps getting bad, but I remember the time thinking they were a decent little indie tag team. And then we got a dark four-corner survival match. Shane Hagedorn defeated Alex Payne, Rhett Titus, and Eddie Kingston. So a year after he was like the big surprise in the last Death Before Dishonor in Philly, he is on the losing end of a four-way match filled with ROH students. So that's an interesting spot for him where they don't see enough to like give him a regular shot here, but apparently he can work a dark match with the students. And so we opened the show, the DVD, and in one of those, yet again, in one of those rarities for this era of ROH, we opened with no backstage promo, but with the Briscoes coming straight to the ring in front of the live crowd.
A front stage promo.
Exactly. Why isn't that caught on? But Mark grabs the mic and he says they're fixing to fight tonight. Jay says tonight Mark has El Generico in a Falls Count Anywhere match. He has Kevin Steen in a Lights Out match, and he doesn't care which of those fights happens first, but they're ready for one of them right now. Steen and Generico come out. Steen with a mic of his own. Steen says they've kicked the Briscoes' asses on pay-per-view. They've kicked their asses all over the ROH circuit. I thought that was kind of cute referring it to the ROH circuit, which they did typically run the same cities over and over, but that feels like such an old school territory thing.
Yeah.
I like that. People should use the word circuit.
But it is true. Like ROH, yeah. they ran during most of this era, they really didn't go south of Philadelphia, and they didn't go west of Minneapolis, like on rare occasions, they'll finally go further west later in 2007, but and then I guess twice at this point they went to England, but really there's you could draw like a circle over like a certain like quarter of the U.S. and that's where they run and that's their circuit up to this point.
And I think that's a really cool thing too, because I think that changes the way your product is when you're playing in front of the same handful of markets, back in the territory days every week, but in the ROH days every few months. Even that, I feel like you kind of have to freshen up your work and your product a little bit more because, it's not like a big time promotion where you might visit us. If it's not one of the outright top markets, maybe once or twice a year, you're visiting them 4 or 5 times a year, maybe. And
yeah, that's one other difference in RH. I mean, RH also had where every single show to some degree was a pay-per-view in that they were trying to sell every single show. So that's like, and also that combined with the fact that they ran basically, like a territory, made their booking very different from the TV promotions.
Yeah. So, Steen continues his promo. He says, the Briscoes, you guys don't have to call us out to fight because there's nothing we enjoy more than beating up you rednecks. Steen says, if you want to fight right now, well, I can't fight because I promised I'd call my mother, but the Generico can. The four start to brawl in the aisle. Steen and Jay fight to the back behind the curtain, and so the match is on between the two that are left, and that would be the Falls Count Anywhere match. El Generico defeated Mark Briscoe via pinfall in 8 minutes, 20 seconds after he hit a cross-corner tornado DDT, that thing where he basically dives through one corner of the ring out the other side on a diagonal, and since it's a Falls Count Anywhere match, he scored the pin right on the floor. Matt, what'd you think about this as an opener?
Well, I definitely liked that they did it as an opener, with the starting hot and heavy, with a brawl, with, a really hot main event feud. I mean, that's definitely different. It makes the show unique and stand out. It was a hot start. I think maybe the match was not quite as good as you might imagine between these two. Like there was a match with Mark and Steen back in Fight at the Roxbury that I thought was, similar length and much better than this. But, it was still pretty darn good. The heat maybe wasn't quite as high as some of the later matches on the night. I'd say what made this match maybe different than maybe I would have liked more is that as a Falls Count Anywhere match, they kind of, even though they both took big bumps, it didn't have like the brutality and hatred that maybe you would want to feel between these two, like you felt the night before. It was more like they were hitting big moves and like taking big bumps, and like it was more of like a athleticism bump match versus like a really intense brawl, if that makes sense. Very early on, Mark hit the shooting star press to the floor, and they obviously got a 2 count on the floor after that. They go to the guardrail, and Generico catches Mark jumping off the guardrail, and they both stand on top of the guardrail, and Generico suplexes Mark off of it. So I guess in a way that was kind of a superplex. There's a spot where Mark goes to the top rope while Generico's on the floor, but Generico pops up and back suplexes him all the way from the apron to the floor, which is a way crazier bump than a lot of the other stuff we've seen, honestly. Mark just takes those kinds of bumps to some degree to this day. There's a spot where Generico hits a sudden haluva kick and Mark falls backwards on the ramp for a 2 count. There's a spot where Mark avoids a brainbuster by the entrance and hits like a pretty wild suplex on the ramp. I don't even know how to describe it, but it was pretty crazy. And then they go back to the ring, and that's when Steen runs at Mark with the ladder, and Mark stops him, but that allows Generico to recover long enough to hit the leap through the corner DDT and get the pin. I really liked that was the finish because, Generico does that move all the time, and at this point, it always was awesome. But, since not every match is Falls Count Anywhere, he can never actually prove that it's a winning move. So I like that he got the win off of that move, because it is like, I don't know. It was probably my favorite move of his during this era. Was that run like from one side of the ring to the other, jump through between the middle and bottom ropes, and like hit the other guy with a DDT. I love that move. I still love that move. But yeah, I think this was a good match, but it doesn't. It wasn't exactly what I think it could have been to be an optimal Falls Count Anywhere match between these two guys. But it was a pretty good opener.
This felt a little... Matt, first off, can you hear me, Matt?
Yes, I can.
Yes, you just coughed just for a second right at the end of your sentence, but no, I just wanted to make sure that we were still on the air. But so this felt just a little on the short side to me, but I did feel like they packed a fair bit into what the time they had, and I do agree with you. It was missing a bit of that nastiness, and it was more of just of a high energy match. It was kind of funny to me that the night after these two were part of a tag match that spent 10 plus minutes in the crowd, where that wasn't explicitly a Falls Count Anywhere match, that was just a street fight. They are in a Falls Count Anywhere match, and it never leaves the ringside area. Like, it never goes into the crowd. They, like you said, they make a brief trip to the entrance ramp, but they never go into the crowd, let alone the back of the building or beyond, which maybe I'm thinking based on the main event, maybe they realized we should save that for those guys tonight.
Yeah, they probably thought it would be overkill, probably.
Yeah. So in a way, it's kind of an argument. Maybe they shouldn't have booked 2 matches like that in the same show, but I would get if that was their idea, like, hey, let's save that for those guys. I get it. But you do get some near falls in the finish happening outside the ring at ringside. And most importantly, I did thought these two guys worked their tails off. Like you talked about the big bumps. You've got two of the nuttier bumpers in the promotion at this point in time. And so you mentioned, like, you see Generico, I would call that a head and arm suplex on the metal entrance ramp, which is just nuts because the ramp obviously is slanted. So you're trying to take a bump where you're like tucking your head and stuff, but you're taking it on a slanted surface, which just feels to me, I mean, who knows? Maybe it's just as easy, but it feels like in theory that would make it even tougher to pull off safely. Like you mentioned, Mark taking the belly to back suplex off the apron to the floor. That was really brutal. This was all big action from second one. There was no build up, which in one sense is an argument for this match only going 8 minutes, because you can really just go hard from the onset and not worry about, are we going to burn out the crowd or numb the fans like you would if you were maybe going to keep this style and pace for 15 minutes. It's a lot easier to get away with an eight. And Then Steen comes out late with a ladder, which distracts Mark enough for Generico to get the win. I like that the build to the big Generico and Steen versus Briscoe's ladder match that's coming up has just been guys grabbing ladders after other matches. Like the whole buildup has just been, hey, we're going to randomly grab ladders when no one else in ROH generally does this, except for the rare gimmick match. And we're just going to keep doing this until we go, oh, ladder match. And there was also a funny moment, Matt, I don't know if you noticed this, where when the match goes to the entranceway up the aisle, you can see, I think it's Jay Briscoe's head and only Jay's head watching the match through a small little opening in the very bottom of the curtain. It's never acknowledged, but it just looks ridiculous. Like him just kind of impassionately just like watching his brother getting his, tail kicked at some points. I thought that was funny, like with just a weird floating head at the bottom of the curtain. So I would call this, to sum up, like a strong, good, a little, maybe I liked it just a little bit more than you. It's a little burst of fun to open the show. It was like a good hors d'oeuvre being handed to you as you walk into a party.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Although I will say this, though. All the ladder teases, if you put yourself in the headspace of the time, they were actually really exciting because ROH had never done an actual ladder match before. And so the idea, like, the first ever ROH ladder match, as overkill as ladder matches are, and they probably even were to some extent back then, if you watched WWE and TNA, like, the idea of a first ever ROH one, it was like, oh my goodness, these guys are going to really show everybody what you could really do in a ladder match. Like there was something exciting about that.
Yeah. And there was, like, I think we saw even on this show, I think you could notice, like, occasionally in Ring of Honor's history up to this point, while they had never had a ladder match, they had wrestlers pull out ladders to do a couple spots with them in a few gimmick matches, including the main event on this show. And even just them bring out the ladder for a spot or two, you could tell some fans were like, wow, a ladder in Ring of Honor. And I don't think we'll ever be that innocent again, because I really do feel like that, that cookie's out of the jar, Matt. We're never going to go back to the point where, like, a ladder is novel ever again. I feel like it is just, it's just a thing that happens. But
now every company needs to now transition to doing Ultimate X matches.
Gotta love those. They on the indies, they should go all that stuff because, they stopped making tables for the indies, so they had to use the doors, but they haven't stopped making bungee cords, till they take those away from you. We've got to go into an Ultimate X-style environment.
An Ultimate X-style environment. I want us to find that. I want us to patent it. I guess we can't patent it. It's already been established by TNA.
I'm sorry. Vince McMahon got in my earpiece for a second and told me to use that verbiage. But it's an ultimate, a letter shaped structure, rope structure. But so right after the match, Jay attacks Steen, but Steen immediately chucks him into the barricade and celebrates with Jericho and his ladder at the entranceway. And this will build to a great ladder spot later on in the night. We then join the No Remorse Corps of Roderick Strong, Davey Richards, and Rocky Romero backstage. They're pumped up for tonight. Roddy says after their match tonight, they're going out. Davey asks if he gets to go. Roddy says no. And Davey's like, well, why not? And Roddy's answer is just that you never get to go. Rocky asks who their partner will be in the big 8-man tag tonight. And Roddy says he's got the hottest free agent in wrestling, at which point Larry Sweeney and Matt Sydal show up. Larry says Roddy made the money right, so they're, Sydal's in the match tonight. Sydal says that any match Delirious is in, he wants his piece. Roddy asks if Sydal is going to fight with that watch he's wearing right now. Matt's like, oh, that's a good idea. And he takes it off and hands it to Sweeney for safekeeping. And for some reason, Davey Richards, who is not affiliated with Larry Sweeney at all in any way at this point, asks Larry to give him a watch multiple times over the rest of the promo. He's like, hey, I want a watch give me a watch like that. So Matt says tonight is a street fight, and the streets are where he's from. Sydal asks if people know about the mean streets of St. Louis, which, for all I know, maybe there are mean streets in St. Louis.
I think there probably are. Yeah,
but clearly the way he said it was like him trying to be. It was supposed to be a comedy spot. Like this guy thinks he's street when he's from St. Louis. But yeah, I had that thought of just sitting there. I'm like, I'm sure St. Louis probably has a mean street somewhere. It's a major city, but Davey keeps.
Sorry.
Oh, go on.
No, I'll say it at the end when you're done.
Okay. So Davey keeps asking Larry Sweeney to give him a watch, and I just wrote my notes. This ends one of the most tonally bizarre skits to build up a serious main event match that I think we've ever seen on this podcast, because this was like two different kinds of comedy for a match that when you watch at the end of the night is pretty goddamn brutal, but this promo building up is complete haha.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's just like this match, like it didn't make anyone seem dangerous or tough and didn't do a good job at all of building intensity for a intense brawl blow-off main event. Yeah, it was a entertaining in its way promo, but very bad at accomplishing what you would think the goal of a promo is.
It is one of those things. It's interesting that even we think of this happening more in places like WWE or the major leagues, but it's interesting to see it even happening a little bit here in this era of Ring of Honor. The old thing of sometimes the worst thing a wrestler can do is show that they're good at comedy because they kind of get pigeonholed in that, and it hurts their aura a bit. Because it's crazy to think we talked about last year when Davey Richards was brought into Ring of Honor, there were rumors that Gabe considered like putting him over Danielson for the world title right at the start of his run. And a year later, he's kind of naturally found himself evolving because he's good at it into being like the joke of his stable, where he's picked on by the other two guys, and he's kind of he's kind of a lunkhead, he's talking about like, oh, I can't drink, I need juice. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but they're clearly picking on him. Like, yeah, we'll get you some juice, or segments like tonight. Like I can't imagine that was the plan for him when he started in Ring of Honor, but it's just one of those things where sometimes if you're good at comedy, people just encourage it because, hey, you are funny. It's entertaining, but
that's a good point. It's a good point.
That brings us to the second match on the show. Jack Evans defeats Deranged via pinfall in 6:42 after hitting the 6:30. Before the match can even get going, a quote-unquote fan, aka a plant, hops the railing with a megaphone and starts shouting Project 161 before he's restrained by security. We'll talk about the general live event reaction to this after the match, but I'll just say that it seemed, from judging by the newsletters and what live reports they got, the fan reception, I don't know if you have any memories of what you felt at the time, was about as poor as it was for the Project 161 angle they did the night before.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, honestly, I think this one was worse because like a disembodied voice is, I think, still more impressive than like this guy,
yeah,
like this guy just made it seem like a total joke, like someone you've never heard of before, doesn't look impressive, like why would anyone care about this?
Yeah, and no shit on this guy. He just looked like an average dude, but that's
yeah.
He didn't even look like a wrestler. He just looked like, which he probably wasn't. He just was like an average kind of, could be any fan in the building just running in saying, like, that does not make Project 161 look like a hip group, that just some random guy that you would never think, oh, that looks like someone that's edgy or cool or a part of a future stable.
I wonder if when the Age of the Fall actually starts, if they bother to explain who these people were that were doing this for them or why. I mean, it's just like, it turns out to just be three guys and one woman, and who are these other guys? I don't know.
Yeah, it feels like they're almost trying to do a bit of a Fight Club feel, but this ain't Fight Club.
Yeah, I wonder.
Fight Club ain't Fight Club.
I wonder if the gimmick that they end up doing as Age of the Fall is different than what they were conceiving of at this point.
Yeah, I think when we get to the end of the show, I have a thought about. I think you could see at least one pivot Gabe makes on the show, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. So, I think this match is an example of. It's something interesting where. I know ROH occasionally edits matches, and that makes sense. Like, I can't blame it. It's probably the smart move where, at this point, ROH, between their DVDs and even their pay-per-views, nothing was live. So they had the opportunity to post-produce and edit anything. And I realize that, in a sense, makes shows better. It might even save some wrestlers some personal embarrassment if they have a bad night. But maybe because this might shock people, being that I'm one half of a podcast that's been running for like approaching a decade that reviews every match of a promotion in chronological order, but I'm a completionist and I like seeing everything as it happened live. And one of the reasons why is I don't like the idea that I'm forming opinions that might be wildly incorrect because I've been given incomplete information. I would like to watch shows, even if something goes wrong, I'd like to see the thing that went wrong. But I understand why promotions would work to hide that when they can. But so the example I would give is this match, because my thoughts on this match are completely different after I read the notes afterwards. Because when I started watching this match, at the start of the match, commentary frames this match as a tryout of sorts for Deranged to return to ROH. And if that's what it was, it didn't work, because this is, I believe, the last match Deranged ever has in any iteration of ROH. Early in the year, he and Azrael worked a dark match, and they actually went over Gran Akuma and Michael Elgin at Domination, actually the last Philly show. But for whatever flirtation, clearly he had done enough there that they were like, hey, let's give him another shot. Whatever flirtation ROH had with Deranged ends right here. And so watching this match, I felt like, oh, this almost feels like one of those showcase squashes they were taping for the ROH wrestling website a year or two before this, where it's, it's about 5 minutes of actual wrestling. Jack gets the opening and the finish, and Deranged gets the middle of the match to do some offense and maybe try and earn a job. The offense here I thought was fun. It's all pretty dynamic stuff. And I would say, while Deranged isn't as smooth as the generation of high flyers that came after him, guys like Matt Sydal, for example, I felt like he could still do fun, flashy, early to mid-aughts indie offense. He can fly a bit. And so the issue I had watching the match, the way it is edited for us, wasn't the moves, it was the atmosphere. It just felt a little bloodless to me, whether it was the Project 161 thing at the start of the match that sank like a lead balloon, or the fact that Deranged hadn't been a regular in ROH in quite some time. The crowd wasn't exactly molten for this. And well, I would say, Matt, that you and I were historically fans of Deranged on this show. We enjoyed his work in the early years of ROH. Something seemed missing from him here. Like, the moves that we saw were good. I liked him doing a delayed brainbuster where he basically just released Jack into the bump rather than driving him down. But I always felt like Deranged, one of his big skills was his charisma, his energy, and he wrestles this match with this oddly flat affect, like he's a little emotionless, which felt weird coming from it. And the whole thing, something felt missing from it. But then I get to the end of the match, I have these thoughts. I think, oh, that's fine enough. But then I look at the live reports, Matt. We'll go to the Observer first, and Dave wrote, Deranged was given a tryout of sorts in Philadelphia. There were ideas for him, but his match with Jack Evans bombed, so nothing is going forward. So first off, that's heartbreaking for him, where not only did the match bomb, but apparently, like, with Dave saying there was ideas for him, that makes it basically sound like it was almost a fait accompli. If he just did passable here, they were already like getting the wheels turning for him. And I would wonder if, like, maybe the original idea, like, if I'm just thinking, where would he slot in? I wonder, and I have no inside knowledge, could he have been a member of Vulture Squad?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that I would bet money that would have been what would have happened after this,
It would have made sense. I think he would have been a decent fit at his best in Vulture Squad. But then there was a live report. I couldn't get a credit to this. Normally I love to give credit, but I found another live report online that said this match was said to have been awful, with Deranged getting chants of "Don't come back," which, again, these are edited off the match, so you don't hear that in the match. There was a PW live report from a man named Doug Wellix, and in the interest of fairness, this is the one positive comment I found. He wrote, "This match was okay, but nothing too special." So he didn't say anything negative about this, but. And then finally, we have a quote from Brian Alvarez. Oh, no, I'll say this for after. But basically, the match I saw, Matt, we saw here, is completely different from what the live report seemed to sound like. So I wouldn't be surprised if this match was longer and they edited out a lot of bad things in a night that was probably off for Deranged.
I think they edited out a few bad things, but I wouldn't say it was like much longer than this. But,
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't remember exactly what went wrong here, but I remember stuff went wrong, definitely. And I remember feeling bad for Deranged because I did like him. And you're right, like, that was the main thing I noticed watching it back, was just like, where's the personality? What's going on? Like, I don't understand why you're looking so flat, like you said. But yes, the moves were good in a lot of the cases, and Deranged does some good selling. He does like a flip bump off of Evans' running knee. There was nothing here that made Deranged seem like not good in the ring at that style. There was actually kind of a scary spot where Evans goes up top to the top rope, and Deranged catches him up there, and Evans flips out of a belly-to-back superplex attempt that Deranged tries, and that leaves Deranged hanging in a tree of woe, but like it's by one leg at first before he corrects it. I'm like, a one-legged tree of woe seems very dangerous to me. Like, yeah. Like you could really rip your knee out. But like what we actually saw, like, had some fun offense, and
So, but on the other hand, it was just a series of moves with nothing in between. Like there was not really much connective tissue in this match. But yeah, the disastrous parts were clearly edited out. I would say this was the I mean, I thought it was not bad, but like from what we saw, but it was definitely the worst match on the show.
Yeah, yeah, even that Doug Wellix I saw in his live report when he was positive about, like mildly positive about this match, he even said at the end of the show, this was the worst match of the night. But so this goes back to my thing of if I'm deranged or if I'm just someone that wants to watch the best show possible, this match is a great argument for editing because you would never know that this was the match that basically sunk a wrestler from getting a job and had the fans chanting "Don't come back" at somebody. But as like the nerdy wrestling fan that just likes the stories and like behind what everything happened, I am now curious at what they cut and how bad things went. But
Yeah,
you know,
I mean, like I'm definitely a completionist too. Like I remember the first pay-per-view that my family ever ordered, like that I ever ordered, like my family let me order, I guess, when I was 7 was WrestleMania 7. And I remember watching it. And it was like close to a 4-hour live event. There were a bunch of promos and stuff. And I was trying to record it on a VHS, and I messed up the recording. It didn't come out, and I was so upset. And then when the Coliseum video came out, it was edited down to 3 hours, and I think there maybe was a little bit of editing in the matches themselves, but pretty minimal. But they edited out a lot of like interviews and like entrances and like different stuff like that. And I remember just being like desperate to find somebody who had the original tape so I could see all of that extra stuff that I remembered. And like I realized they edited out. And then I found the full pay-per-view versions of like WrestleMania 6 and WrestleMania 5, and they were just I liked them so much more than the edited Coliseum versions, just because like they had all of these other interviews, and like even just like seeing the like remember when they used to have in the late 80s and early 90s the countdown clocks for intermission on the WWF pay-per-views. Like I even was like excited to see those. So I am definitely a completionist.
yeah, like me, I am the exact same kind of nerdy fan like you when it comes to that stuff because, yeah, like I get interested where I forget. I think I have like a copy of WrestleMania 4 or 5 on VHS, but it's like the live pay-per-view broadcast, and it has Gene Okerlund just hawking WrestleMania 4 merchandise. And for some reason, most fans will be like, I don't want to see that shit. I'll be like, that makes me want to save this copy because I need to see this shit.
Yeah, yeah.
But
That said, WWF was not as bad with the editing as WCW was on some
oh,
of
they
those
were
tapes.
awful.
They edited out like half of the matches, WCW. Like they made like everything a 2-hour show. Like I realized that just recently, like in the past couple of years, they finally found some of these matches from the original pay-per-view edit of Halloween Havoc 1990. Like because they're like even WWE's like vault, like or their like what they like their tape library didn't have a good copy of the original pay-per-view version, and they posted the Turner Home Video version, which was like heavily edited. So now you
Yeah.
can finally see some of these original matches that like people haven't seen unless they had the pay-per-view on tape for like the past 35 years.
Do you think that was just a matter of like whoever was running Turner Home Entertainment, like literally being too cheap to do a larger than 2-hour VHS tape?
Yeah, I mean
Like,
that, and they probably just say, yeah, who cares? Like no one cares.
yeah,
And not having any like they're not being in tune at all with wrestling fans being like, oh yes, we fucking do care. Like of course we want to see all this stuff. We're insane. Like we're all lunatics. Like
yeah.
we want to see everything.
When you're talking about your stuff, like what went through my mind is what drove me crazy. You talked about the difference between the Coliseum videos and the live pay-per-views for WWF. What drove me crazy was I knew that like there'd be things WWF would edit off the pay-per-views for the home VHS, even though, like you said, they weren't nearly as bad as the WCW was. But I also knew that there would be special promos and backstage segments on the Coliseum video home releases
Yes.
that weren't on the pay-per-views. So there's this band called Art Brut, a rock band, and they have a song called The Replacements, which is about the lead singer after all these years discovering the band The Replacements. And there's the breakdown, like the bridge of the song that kind of he builds up to is him going kind of crazy where he goes, secondhand CDs are cheaper, reissue CDs have extra tracks, and he keeps saying those two things back and forth like he can't decide. And as a kid, I feel like I was constantly like, well, the pay-per-view version has more segments, but actually it doesn't have more segments because the Coliseum video version has, but that one cuts, and I would just go back and forth and it would drive me crazy. I wanted someone, like, I know on some torrent sites now there are people that literally will patch pay-per-views together,
to
like
the
Legacy Heroes.
like the Coliseum extras to the live
Yeah.
pay-per-view.
Or even like, this this segment is in better video quality from like the live thing, but it's missing the original theme, so we'll dub that over. Like, there are some real scientists out there doing the heavy work here, but I hope someone can do that, which is just give me the ultimate director's cut where it's all the Coliseum video extras and everything that was on the pay-per-view.
Yeah,
to me, that is what I want.
That's great. No, like WrestleMania 3, the Coliseum video had like clips from the WrestleMania press conference and stuff from like before the show when Gino was like, there are thousands of miles of cables around the arena, but yeah, they cut out a lot of stuff from the actual pay-per-view broadcast. Fun fact about Art Brut, former Through the Years guest Albert Ching once bought a table from the lead singer of Art Brut off of like Craigslist or something.
Holy cow. I did not know that. There you go. That is crazy. Wow. Now, Matt, you caught me off guard again. You caught me off guard with something you said before a few shows ago. You caught me off guard again. I did not expect to hear that. So anyway, the one last news note I have about this is just about the Project 161 thing. I alluded to this earlier. Brian Alvarez wrote in the Figure 4 Weekly, we're told this thing, Project 161, totally bombed both nights with people either not caring at all about it or violently hating it. So yeah, this opening weekend was like basically this Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark of ROH angles. It was a bad soft opening for this.
Although violently hating it feels like projection by Brian Alvarez, since that's the sort of thing he does, where he'll just get like real angry about something.
That sounds like a Brian Alvarez turn of phrase. But I think the point is, we had some notes we read about the Project 161 angle the night before. This was not, by basically everyone that wrote into newsletters that attended this weekend, this was not well received at all, this start. But we'll get into our third match tonight. That is Chris Hero and Jigsaw, scored to the ring by Bobby Dempsey, Larry Sweeney, and Tank Dolan, but not Sarah Del Rey, because she has a match coming up. And they defeated Claudio Castagnoli and Nigel McGuinness in 14 minutes, 59 seconds, when Hero pinned Claudio after he hit him with Claudio's own Race to the Top tournament trophy. Speaking of things that are edited out of this DVD, Doug Welks, again, in his PW Torch live report, wrote, before the match, Larry Sweeney cut a very long-winded promo that went on for way too long. That is something else you don't see on this DVD, and I do feel like there was time for it. So I wonder if he had an off night or something, because generally you would think ROH loved them some Larry Sweeney promo time. It's interesting that they excised an entire promo, but either way, Matt, do you remember that? Probably not. What did you think about this match?
Do not remember it. This match was starting to do the thing that the Nigel versus Chris Hero match from the night before was doing that I didn't like, which was just like getting so into the silliness and the shtick. And Hero, he did a lot of stalling to the point where not Nigel would wrestle Jigsaw, and it was pretty good. And then every time Hero ran in, like he came in, he would be in for like a second, and then the Claudio would come in, he'd tag out to Jigsaw, and he'd run to the entranceway and did, doing all this like flipping and stuff. And I was like, this is entertaining, but like it's getting to be a lot. But then like they, instead of just continuing that throughout the whole match, they actually struck a good equilibrium where at a certain point they just do a match, that clicks in, and like Claudio starts wrestling with Jigsaw and doing some really cool spots, like when he lifted Jigsaw from the floor all the way over the top rope into the ring by his head, like stuff like that. And they just started having a match, and Hero did some offense too, and he got into the match. And once I actually started wrestling, I thought it was really, really good. Like it was just, the wrestling, obviously all four guys are good wrestlers. Claudio was having another, I think, great night, including having, up to this point, probably the longest giant swing he's ever done in ROH up to this point on Jigsaw, and the crowd was just going nuts for it. Although in a really funny moment, I don't know if you noticed this. Did you notice what Jigsaw started doing when he was being swung around?
What did he do?
He started holding onto his trunks because I think they were starting to like fly off. Which was very, very funny. Claudio's offense was just awesome here, popping right up after Hero knocked him down and hitting the Apamari water slide. And then there was a spot with Hero on the top rope. Jigsaw leapt off his shoulders with a leg drop onto Claudio, which I thought was very cool. And then Hero immediately followed that with a double stomp for a near fall. They get back into like Nigel
hitting lariats and Tower of London, and they do still have some sweet and sour ink nonsense where Nigel chasing Dempsey and Tolan to the back, and then when everyone's distracted, and that's when Sweeney gives Hero the trophy that he hits Claudio with to get the win. But I thought this was it actually struck a much better balance for me than a lot of recent Hero stuff in terms of like they do the silly stuff at the beginning and then they get down into it by the halfway point and it becomes something more than what I would like to see from these guys. And I think everyone was good. I think Claudio continued to stand out, and I thought I really, really enjoyed this.
I like this match. I did not hate this match, but I think I like this match notably less than you. I did like the basic booking setup of the matchup because it was Gabe kind of taking advantage of something he's good at as a booker, which is having a wrestler have two separate ongoing feuds where, this is a battle of Hero facing two, he's having he's feuding with Claudio and Nigel. So it makes sense that they would team up against him for this night, especially since they're both baby faces at this point. And Jigsaw, Jigsaw wasn't really a heel in ROH at this point, just starting out, but it even makes sense, if you know their Chikara connections the commentators basically say that Jigsaw's a hired gun for the night from Sweet and Sour Incorporated. So, but as for the match, if you've been watching these shows along with us recently, this match I think will seem somewhat familiar to you and so this match review is going to be somewhat familiar to you as well. It's the ROH Chris Hero 2007 match with the pre-match shenanigans, the early match stalling. Although this time I felt like it was combined with a slow start when they actually did finally get to the wrestling, which makes this match, I felt like, kind of the opposite of the opener, where that match felt like that was half the length of this one in time, but it felt like it had doubled the action of this one to me, even though, like you mentioned, there were some highlight spots. But the structure in this match is traditional and it's rock solid. It makes sense. Hero as the heel stalls early. He avoids Claudio whenever he can. And I felt like Hero has a couple startled reactions here whenever he realizes he's alone in the ring with Claudio that I thought were legitimately great, where he gives a really good start, like jump scare, like, whoa, like all turns around and sees Claudio somewhere. And then one of the faces gets isolated in the match, in this case, Nigel. Eventually we get the hot tag where the heels get their butts kicked. Then we go to the finish. And, that sounds good, right? Like a good standard babyface heel tag match structure. My problem with it was I felt like every part of that structure I just laid out wasn't nearly as satisfying as I'd want it to be. Like when Nigel's the face in peril, Hero and Jigsaw almost exclusively focus on working on his arm, which is smart psychology again, because Nigel does most of his offenses with lariats with his arm, but it made for a bit more of a subdued heat segment, and that'd be fine to me if the payoff to that slower, more focused work was big. But to me, maybe where we differ is I don't know if there was a huge payoff. Like Nigel basically does all his usual stuff when he gets back on offense later. He doesn't really sell the arm. And then likewise, after the hot tag, normally the trademark of ROH tags in this era is the hot tag, and then you get the final 5 minutes, which is kind of crazy and everyone going in and out. And instead of like a pretty hot final 5, I felt like this one had a fairly warm final 3. So it's just a little less of what I wanted. Hero's act, I keep saying this, it is very over. It's a good act, but as someone who is watching every show, I wish he varied it a little more and integrated it into the wrestling a bit better. I do agree with you that it was integrated a bit better in this match than in other recent matches. For me, maybe I'm just getting a bit fatigued. It still wasn't integrated enough for me. It still sometimes feels like in this era of Chris Hero and ROH, your choice is see him do his fun act that if you've watched a bunch of it, you've seen it repeated over and over again, or him having a good match. He's capable of both, but it seems like at this point, not really at the same time. He hasn't figured out how to thread them together, at least in ROH. And I don't think it's unreasonable to want to see his act vary a bit more because ROH wanted you to buy every DVD. I get that if you were the fan that was picking and choosing and watching every 4th or 5th ROH show, his act would still be really fresh right now. But if you were the intended audience where Gabe wanted you, I'm sure Kerry Silken wanted you to buy every DVD, you've seen a lot of this over and over again, even though it is a good act.
And also the picker and choosers probably were people that would probably buy both Death Before Dishonor nights.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point too. But there are some fun moments. I like you. I thought that Claudio, where he pulled Jigsaw up from the floor into the ring just by his head over the top rope, that was amazing. Claudio at this point is good for like one crazy feat of strength almost every match, it seems like, in this run he's on, that just isn't repeated. Like, he just finds a way to be strong that you're not expecting. And then, like you mentioned, I wrote my notes too. I thought that was one of the longer giant swings we've seen from him in ROH. I think it was roughly a 20 count at least on Jigsaw. I thought it was neat to see Hero and Jigsaw do a couple different moves where Jigsaw was launched off Hero's shoulders, because they're both fairly tall guys for indie wrestling, so it was kind of neat to see them stack up like that. So I did not hate this match. I thought the whole thing was a little bit above average, but it's another one of those matches where I feel like these four guys could have had a better straight wrestling match. So even though I do see your point, they did integrate a bit better than we've seen recently, I wanted full integration. I don't think we've got there. So after the match, Hero poses with Claudio's Race to the Top trophy, and he has Larry Sweeney hold Claudio's face right over the trophy, his eye right over the pointy part at the top of the trophy. The Hero wants to maim Claudio. Hero then comes off the top to stomp Claudio eye first onto the trophy, which is a really grisly thought to even think about. But Claudio is able to shove the trophy away in time, but he's not.
Was that on purpose, or were we supposed to think that he actually did get it in his eye? That's what I couldn't tell.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think about that. I will say, if that was the idea, they didn't do it subtly enough or cut it close enough, which for the health of the wrestler, probably a good idea. But to me, it almost came off as just, he shoved the trophy away in time, but he didn't get his head away his time. But you know what? Especially when we see in a second that Claudio blades for it, maybe it really was like more what you are thinking of, which is maybe it was supposed to be, you were supposed to think, they really like stabbed him in the head with this trophy. But either way, Hero then grinds Claudio's face against the trophy, and that's when Claudio blades. Very rare for Claudio. Claudio not one of the big blood guys in Ring of Honor, so they were really trying to make this an angle on this night that you do remember. But unfortunately, by the end of the night, you're going to see so much violence, you're not going to remember any of this. But Claudio blades. Hero destroys the Race to the Top trophy. The most dangerous thing to be in ROH is a trophy. You do not last very long. But
there's only one trophy that has the staying power.
But then Tank Tolan, Bobby Dempsey join Hero in the ring. Nigel returns. He had gone to the back, but he sees, oh shit, Claudio's getting beat up. He returns to the ring. Hero and Sweeney bail. They're like chickens. Tank and Bobby are left in the ring, and they get taken out by Nigel, including Nigel at one point throws Bobby into Tank in the corner. Nigel checks on Claudio. He checks on Claudio's eye. He asks for a doctor before helping to the back. So yeah, they tried to heat up this angle. It's kind of a generic angle, but the most notable thing, again, was you don't see Claudio blade very much.
I would say the other notable thing that I don't think that the announcers really made clear is this is really the beginning of like the proper Hero and Claudio feud, because, prior to this, the whole thing was Sweeney didn't like Claudio, but Hero was sort of hands off on Claudio, He never did anything to Claudio. They teamed together at Domination. You know what I mean? Like, this is the first time that Hero actually betrays Claudio and gets violent with him. So in that sense, it's a significant angle.
Yeah, especially going up in tone, because even the little bit of tension between them before was more just like Hero being like, I just have to move on from you to, I'm being kind of a dick, but I got to move on from my career. That's a far cry from trying to gouge a guy's eye out of his head. Yes. So yeah, they definitely, like you said, flicked a switch here on the intensity. We then cut to Bryan Danielson backstage. Bryan is sporting a black eye. I don't think he had the night before, so he must have gotten it in his match with Matt Sydal. Bryan says he has a lot of respect for his opponent tonight, Mike Quackenbush. He learned from Reckless Youth, who was one of Quackenbush's traveling buddies. And he says, Reckless told me all these stories about you, Quack, and you and Reckless and Don Montoya working the indies. But Bryan goes, well, I'm not a young wrestler anymore.
26 still feels pretty young to me, but I guess I get his point.
That is such a 26-year-old thing to say. Like, as soon as you get past 25, being like, I'm not young anymore. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah, you're pretty fucking young, man. But he says, he's not a young wrestler anymore. He's the veteran. And while Quackenbush might have his cult following and all the lucha arm tracks, I love how dismissively he was about that. He can't handle the best wrestler in the world. So, and then that brings us to the Shimmer title match. This is the first time I believe that the Shimmer title was ever defended in ROH. They had been promoting this for a few shows that this was going to happen, that basically ROH, not that they ever had a women's title, was going to recognize the Shimmer title as basically a de facto women's title in the promotion occasionally. And Sarah Del Rey, the first Shimmer women's champion ever, successfully defended the title here when she defeated Lacey via pinfall in 12 minutes, 37 seconds after she hit the Royal Butterfly submission into the Power Slam. So yeah, this was an extreme rarity for this era of Ring of Honor. This is, at 12 and a half minutes. If this isn't the longest women's match in ROH history, and I think it is, but if it isn't, it's got to be close. I think this is the longest women's match in ROH history up to this point. It's also not hidden as the second match from the bottom, the way Gabe almost always did with the women's matches, where that was like the lowest slot on any wrestling show totem pole. This is actually almost halfway into the card. This is also the first time, like I said, that the Shimmer title was ever defended in ROH. And so maybe that's why they're giving this match more of an opportunity than women have ever gotten before. So they really want to get this Shimmer integration on the right foot here. Dave Prazak, obviously, who was one of the people behind Shimmer, he's on commentary. He even talks about how because they're not under Shimmer contract, Sweet and Sour Incorporated are banned from ringside, which explains why there's no interference in this match. And in fact, not only is there no outside interference, there's no cheating at all, even though technically it's a heel versus heel match. So this is the most substantial opportunity the women had ever had in ROH, I would say, up to this point. And they're clearly taking it seriously by the fact that, like, we're going to try and have a strap match. We're not even going to try and do like healing within the match or any tomfoolery at all. But I felt like as a wrestling match, it was sad to say. It was just decent. It was not bad at all. But in ROH, Sarah Del Rey so far, she's been pushed very strong, almost as kind of a dominant monster. And here in this match, she's on defense and she's selling more than she ever has in the company before, which kind of threw me off a bit. A few minutes in, she crashes and burns. She does this big senton to the floor, and Lacey avoids it. And she uses that opportunity to control most of the rest of the match and work over her back. And I really like in wrestling big momentum-changing moments in matches like that, where someone's humming along and one big moment puts them on defense for a big continuous stretch. But it also meant in this match that the thing that bothered me was we don't get a ton of Sarah Del Rey kicking ass in this match, which just disappointed me because that's a really fun part of watching Sarah Del Rey wrestle, is like the big punishing big boots and just being a big truck of a human being that's just wrecking fools. I thought Sarah's selling of her back was pretty good. She's not just frequently grabbing it. She's also massaging a certain part. I think at one point she's trying to slap feeling back into it. She was trying to do a lot of good, like, acting work to try, how can I find different ways to show my back is hurting me? Lacey, as she often does, she threw kicks here, but she threw a ton of kicks in this match. And I do appreciate that she throws kicks differently than most wrestlers. Most wrestlers, especially in this era, do those little short, fast, loud thigh slapping kicks. And she ain't doing the thigh slap. And she does these long, slightly slower kicks with her really long legs, where she basically swings her legs like she's welding, like the 2x4 in a side-scrolling beat-em-up game on the Super Nintendo. Like, just these long swings that are kind of slow, but they look good in a way. And they're unique. And those kicks all the kicks do have this nice payoff moment where eventually Sarah grabs one of them and then just turns that. She brings her forward and turns into a powerbomb. I thought that was a nice payoff to, like, hey, you threw too many kicks. And for the second straight night, ROH does this really awkward woman watches the entire match standing motionless at the entranceway with the camera cutting awkwardly to them during the match, possibly to cover up a botch, which they did the night before with Sarah Del Rey during the Daisy Hayes-Lacey match, and now they do it with Daisy Hayes during the Sarah Del Rey-Lacey match. And I wrote in my notes, is this Gabe's one story idea for women? If so, at least increases the number from 0, which it used to be. So, Also, at one point, Lacey during this match, she took a water break in the middle of it, and I don't think it was even like a cocky heel, like, "Oh, I'm doing so good, I'm going to take a break." Like, she didn't really play it up. I think it was literally she just was thirsty, and I was thinking maybe she felt like, Jesus Christ, this is a 12-minute match in ROH for women. This is like showing up for work and being told you have to run a marathon on no notice. Like, it was just funny to see them having to do water. Because let's face it, like, 12 minutes for the women in 2007 ROH would be like 60 minutes for the men in terms of how rarely you see it. So I'd rate this match as above average, but nothing special. It's a match that's very competent, logically structured, and part of me just wishes that this was a really rare opportunity for the women in the Ring of Honor, and I kind of wish that they went a bit bigger and a bit dumber. Like, just maybe don't focus on having a really well-structured, sensible match and just do every big spot you know. But, yeah, I think for 2007 ROH, it's still a win that the promotion was finally able to offer a full-length women's match where the fans were respectful, even if not super hot, and a match that was all about the women and the wrestling in the ring, and it got more than 10 minutes, and the fact that it took them 5 years to have one match that checked all of those boxes is progress, but also pretty sad.
Yeah, I like the match better than you. Not by like an incredible amount, but I thought it was a solidly good match, and like the best women's match in ROH history. And again, I know it's a low bar, but I feel like they've a few times over the past like year and a half of ROH had the new winner to that title. You know, like first it was that 4-way best in the world with Mercedes Martinez, right? And I think this is probably the winner at this point. It's a full length match, like you said, no bullshit. And I do think that Lacey was really good here. You know, just like very like good intensity, really made sure that like she made her offense dynamic. You know, she had like a body scissors on and was slapping Del Rey's back and like pulling back Del Rey's hair as she locked in a Boston Crab. You know, things like that. She was showing a lot of fire, screaming as she attacked Del Rey on the floor. I think she put in like a legitimately very good performance. I think Del Rey was good, but Lacey was more of a standout in this match than she was. And yeah, like you said, there's not like a ton of really notable things that happen. It's just like a very solidly well-worked match. But I do think the crowd was genuinely into it by the end, and in terms of like caring about who won. And there was a good spot pretty late where Del Rey ducked a Lacey clothesline and hits what I would describe as a really impactful bridging German suplex. And I thought the finish was also very good, where she rolled through the sunset flip and locked in the Royal Butterfly. So I thought, it did obviously it never lasts in ROH, but it felt like it could have been a new era for women's wrestling in ROH, and it wasn't really, but it was. I'd say it was a good match.
And it was neat to see them get that kind of opportunity. Like, if I'd been there live that night, I would have been like grabbing your shirt sleeve and being like, "Matt, what the fuck is happening? This match just keeps going." And I'd probably have been saying after like minute 7, I'd be like, "What are they doing, Matt? Is this match ever going to end? Did they forget to tell them to go home, Matt? What's going on?" But we then join Brent Albright backstage. Albright says, "Tonight is the night. He'll have no problem breaking Morishima's neck with the half Nelson suplex or taking his arm out of the socket with the crowbar. Morishima has to ask himself if he's going to get out or tap out." And I love at this point, this has been established, that 90% of every Brent Albright promo is him basically saying, "These are 2 moves I do." Like, it'd be like for every Hulk Hogan promo, it's just him saying, "Leg drop." I mean, in a way, it's good at emphasizing, watch out for these 2 things, but every promo is him basically saying, like, get out or tap out. I'm either going to hurt your shoulder with the crowbar or I'm going to drop you on your head with a half Nelson suplex.
It's as basic a promo as could be, but now I can't stop. I'll never be able to watch another Brent Albright promo without imagining Hulk Hogan doing probably being like, "Watch out for the leg drop, brother."
Like if that was the whole promo, you got to ask yourself, is your neck and upper chest going to be okay after the leg drop?
Yeah, like if Ric Flair did a promo, it's like, "Tony, gonna chop him, gonna put on the figure 4 leg lock. Woo!" And then he walked away.
I think you just going, "Tony," and the long pause might be one of my new favorite Matt impressions
there
ever.
There are just so many Tonys in wrestling,
Yeah, there really are. They just keep popping up. But That brings us to Bryan Danielson defeated Mike Quackenbush via ref stoppage in 17 minutes, 8 seconds when Quackenbush passed out, I believe, in a triangle choke with elbows being thrown at his head. So, Matt, this is an indie dream match with Bryan even alluding to that in his promo, Quackenbush being the indie technical guy of note on the scene in the generation that came a few years before him. This isn't the first time they wrestled each other. That would have been a match at the famous 2004 IWA Mid-South Ted Petty Invitational Tournament that we occasionally both reference on the show as kind of a who's who of indie wrestling for the era. And after this, Danielson and Quack would only have 2 more singles matches against each other. They'd wrestle once in WXW in Germany the next year in 2008. And then in 2009, strangely enough, Quack would come back to work one more singles match with Danielson in ROH. And then they'd have a couple more matches, I think, in 2009 on opposite sides of tag matches in Jakarta, including one particularly good, kind of fondly remembered one. But anyway, so this is kind of a rare instance of the dream match that only happened 3 times, or actually, no, that would be 4 times. But what do you think about this one?
So, as you might expect, this was a very well-wrestled match. I would describe it as the mid-card version of their match, as opposed to like what they probably would have done if they had a big main event, if that makes sense. There was not the level of intensity that I would have liked. But, they're such great wrestlers, especially obviously Danielson, but also Quack. That I thought it still was very good. Danielson was not at the max of his personality. He was sort of playing it pretty straight, although he did pepper in little cheap shots and aggression and stuff like that. But a lot of the early part of the match was just them doing their mat wrestling. There was a spot where they did what the announcers described as dueling frog headstands, and then instead of doing that spot where they would sometimes people do where they start slapping each other in that position, they just shake hands as a stalemate and they both release. There's actually a spot the crowd wanted such sportsmanship that the crowd actually booed Danielson when he doesn't clean break in the corner and he headbutts Quack and kicks him instead. So I thought that was funny. There was a fun spot in the middle where Danielson is putting Quack in the surfboard and he's pulling back at Quack's face, and the crowd is really getting into saying I have till 5, but Danielson keeps withholding it. He'll at one point he was saying he teases it, he's like, I have a completely legal hold. and then eventually he just goes, I have till 5. And then the crowd goes nuts for that one. Danielson's pretty good with playing with the crowd and stuff like that. But there was this kind of element of oh, we're having fun here for a while. And then they do kick it up near the end. Quackenbush especially definitely shows a lot of intensity as he starts firing up after a pretty long sequence where Danielson is in control. There's a spot where he hits double knees off the top and then locks in the stretch plum, and he really wrenches it while Danielson screams. And then he pulls Danielson back for the center and locks in a cross arm breaker, and they do a couple strike exchanges. And there's a very good near fall where Quack ducks a roaring elbow and hits a small package. I think that was probably the best near fall of the match. And then Danielson locks in a pretty sudden triangle choke and does the elbows to the head and gets the win. I thought the finish was sudden, but the crowd, I think, did like it. They weren't oh, that's it. So I think it worked. But yeah, and I thought it was very good. I really don't have real specific complaints about the work. I know they could do better. But this was still a good middle of the card match.
Yeah, I felt this match had a really fun atmosphere, although I agree with you, it wasn't a main event atmosphere. It's in Philly, so of course Quackenbush is over big. That's Chikara's home base. But Danielson was even, I would say, a little more over than Quack. But the fans don't choose a side in this match. You could tell they love both these guys, and you can tell from the way they react to their entrances that they're not just excited to see both of these guys. They're excited to see these two guys have a match against each other on this night. They're excited for the whole thing, the combination. And I think I thought you made a great point about how the moments of sportsmanship where they were booing, they wanted to see, they knew these guys were known for good technical wrestling, and they wanted to see a technical wrestling match. There's a few times in this match after these little technical wrestling exchanges where they actually give a little round of applause, just they that was the main course for them, which I really liked about this, the technical wrestling. I also love matches like this where it's about two wrestlers who work the same style and who is the best at it. You know, Danielson would do this years later, recently with Zack Sabre Jr. But in this case, like, they're both very different takes on the same thing. These two guys were both known as like really good indie technical wrestlers, but they have completely different takes on technical wrestling, where Quack's technical wrestling is a lot more fluid and flashy. It's more lucha inspired. Danielson's is far more grounded and gritty, you know. And so because it's this battle of technical wrestlers, a spot early on, like the one you mentioned, where they do the double headstands and they do the handshake while they're upside down, in a lot of matches, I would say, oh, that's a little bit corny and forced. But to me, because this whole match is about two acclaimed technical wrestlers, I was like, it works for me because, you know, it is like, oh, we've reached a stalemate. Like it's like real recognizing real. You know, we're like, hey, I see how good you are. Yeah, and I see how good you are. But another thing I really liked about this match was so many wrestling matches, they treat the technical wrestling like the vegetables you have to eat before you get to the good stuff in your meal. A lot of matches, the technical mat wrestling fills up the entirety of, say, the first, 5 to 10 minutes of a match. And then they kick into the action. And from there, you get almost no technical wrestling for the rest of the match. Here, the action does ramp up over the course of the match, but they never abandon the holds. They're threaded throughout the match. There are major spots even late, which in one way is easy because Danielson, some of his finishers are submission holds. But this match, I felt like, had a real nice note to the whole thing where the technical wrestling is, like I said, threaded throughout, and it feels natural. The match isn't nothing but holds, but the holds aren't also all confined to the start of the match. It's a match that puts the technical wrestling, pretty front and center in a non-forced way, and the crowd is appreciative of it. And there's fun seeing these two takes on technical wrestling collide. Like, it's fun to see Daniels in a couple of more zany Quackenbush spots, like the headstand hold, and it's funny to see Danielson paste Quack with these hard strikes, and Quack eventually getting pissed off and firing back. The contrast, I will say, it did hurt Quack for me a little bit at a couple of points, because I am a big fan of Quack as a wrestler, but there are a few moments here where you see some of his strikes right after Danielson's, and there's this noticeable difference in snugness and realism, where if you watch Quack wrestle, say, another Chikara guy, you're not seeing a big disparity, so it's not kind of breaking you out, where, you see a Danielson strike and a Quack strike, and you're like, oh, there's a big difference. And likewise, I would say with selling, Quacks can be bordering on theatrical, like a little bit of that theater kid energy with some of his facial expressions. And then next to Brian's, where I think Brian does a good job of selling, but his is a lot more naturalistic, at least compared to the Quackenbush style.
Yeah. Quackenbush, definitely, his facial expressions do not feel realistic, I would say. They're they're dramatic, but they're like very dramatic. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like when they say sometimes, like, acting, movie acting has to be very subtle, and then acting for a theater, like a play, you have to play for the person in the back room, so it has to be bigger. Quack is a wrestler who wrestles for the theater. Danielson's wrestling more for the movies, But my favorite sequence in this match is Quack's comeback in the middle, because the night before this match, on our last episode, we covered a match where Brian wrestled Seidel, where Brian kind of ate Seidel up and dominated the match, and he quickly cut off almost every one of Seidel's comebacks. What's cool here is during Quack's comeback in this match, there's at least 2 or 3 times where Danielson tries to cut off Quackenbush, but Quack cuts off the cutoffs. And it makes for this really satisfying vibe of, like, Quack's having this big, meaningful, uninterrupted comeback, but he's having to, like, struggle to keep it going. Danielson's never cutting him off completely, but he's trying to. And it's another thing about this match that just felt natural in a way other matches don't. It's not like, hey, it's my turn to do 5 moves in a row and you just stand there and take them. It was more like, hey, you're going to get to do 5 moves in a row, but you're going to have to earn it. You're going to have to fight through to hit them.
When you said Quack cuts off the cutoffs, I was like, keep him away from Tobias Funke.
Don't body shame David Cross, Matt. Come on.
I was not. But he's a never nude, and he wouldn't like it if he cut off the cutoffs.
Yeah, I forgot that he was a never nude. How could I forget that? So yeah, I felt like this match got plenty of time, but kind of touching on what you were like, where it felt like the mid-card version. I almost wish this match was even longer because it felt like they were just entering the part of the match that was really going into the highest gear that would have made it like a main event level match, that would have made it special, where there was some of the biggest moves. They had a really fun near fall for Quack on a small package. And instead, it feels like the match shifts into a new gear. And then 1 minute later, I agree with you that the Danielson ending was kind of abrupt. So to me, like you, I felt like this was a very good match. It's not quite great. If I had to give it a star rating, like 3 3/4 stars, but really enjoyable for what it was. But I think you put it great, where it is like the best version of the mid-card version of a match these two guys could have. It's a match that maybe wish these two had a best of 7 series, because I feel like if they had to wrestle each other often in a short period of time, they'd probably have gone into some interesting directions, like gone into like different weird, like, okay, let's change up for this match, or let's go bigger for this match. And this match felt like the one you would see at match 1 or 2 of a 7-match series, which makes sense because this is the second time they ever wrestled each other. I will say I do think this was better than the match they had at the Ted Petty Invitational, which I remember being fun but disappointing given how high my expectations were. This match I think is better than that. My memory of that match, although I haven't watched it in quite a while. So this would be the end almost. We'll get to see Quack one more time this year. So we'll go to PW Insider. They wrote, due to a scheduling conflict, Mike Quackenbush is not currently scheduled for any upcoming ROH events, but he will be back as soon as possible. And then Dave wrote in The Observer something very similar, which was, Quackenbush has a lot of bookings elsewhere, so probably won't be around until early next year. And so I'll note, Quack works one more match for ROH in a couple shows, and then he works 1 6-man tag for ROH at the start of 2008, and that's it for him in the Gabe Sapolsky era of Ring of Honor, although he would get 2 singles matches in early 2009 against Danielson and Jerry Lynn, of all people, in ROH, and I think he works a 6-man tag for ROH in 2012 under a mask as one of Los Ice Creams, which was a Chikara gimmick, but yeah, I guess it must have been scheduling. I know it must not have been like that. Sapolsky soured on Quack, because when Gabe broke away and got fired from ROH and started with doing Dragon Gate USA, he used Quack and all the Chikara guys quite a bit. So it must have been scheduling or something like that, because yeah, it's a shame, because he was really pretty damn over everywhere he worked, and he was doing really good performances everywhere he worked in ROH so far. So. But it's almost over for already, Matt. So what the heck? We joined Bill Apter backstage with the Resilience. I did not expect to see Bill Apter on the show.
They were like, he kind of looks like Gary Michael Capetta.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Dime story, Gary Michael Capetta. Bill introduces himself as a wrestling journalist, and he's there to ask Austin Aries what's going to happen tonight. Aries says the No Remorse Corps, is how he says it, is scared. They tried to take out his ankle last night, but they didn't get the job done. He's street fought, not at 100% before. And then he introduces the Resilience's partner for tonight, Delirious. Delirious cuts a promo on Delirious Ease, and Bill throws to the second half of the show. I will say Bill didn't do much here, but I still think he was an upgrade on Rebecca Bayless. And if you're wondering why, although he is no Gary Michael Capetta, if you're wondering why Rebecca Bayless was not at the show, Matt, we'll go to PW Insider, who wrote, Mike Johnson, I believe, Rebecca Bayless missed the Philadelphia event over the weekend as she was booked for the Insane Clown Posse's Juggalo Championship Wrestling Tour. So Bill Apter appeared as a backstage interviewer in segments for the DVD release.
Had Gathering of the Juggalos started yet by 2007? Because
I'm not sure, but
well, while you're talking, I'm going to look it up.
Literally, championship. I will say, Mike Johnson wrote segments in plural for Bill Apter, and unless he did something so bad had to be edited off Deranged style, he came here for one segment, because that's the only time you're going to see Bill Apter on this show. Next,
it had started by 2000, so they were well into the Gathering era by then. Man, I wonder if that's where Becky was that week. Yeah, okay. It was from August 9th to August 12th. That was this weekend, right?
Yeah, this was August 11th.
Yeah,
yeah.
Okay. So let it be known that Rebecca Bayless missed this Death Before Dishonor because she had to go to the Gathering of the Juggalos.
And I don't think she's the first lower level ROH employee that has picked a Juggalo show over ROH, because I vaguely recall that they seem to pay people pretty well for some of those shows. So, like, strange enough, as we've had so many beloved heroes in the world become villains in the last decade, more than ever before. But it seems like as time has gone on, like the Insane Clown Posse have become more and more like admirable, like the more you hear about them. And yeah, it seemed like I'm sure, now that I say this, we will get emails of talking about horrible things someone has done, because that seems to always happen. But everything I've heard in recent years seems to be they've been fairly socially responsible and even like acknowledging like, oh, we shouldn't have done that back in the day. So, maybe Dave Presnick, when he famously said, fuck the clowns, maybe we should not fuck the clowns unless we love them. Anyway.
I mean, no one's ever going to make sense of anything you just said, so it's okay.
Anyway, next, Jay Briscoe comes out and grabs a mic, and he says he's waited long enough for Kevin Steen. He calls him to bring his fat ass to the ring so they can do this thing. Sting races to the ring. The fight is on. It's a lights-out match. Kevin Steen defeats Jay Briscoe in 14 minutes, 10 seconds after 2 leg kicks from El Generico and a package pile driver. So the rules to this lights out match, it's basically no DQ, and you only win when your opponent can't answer a 10 count. So it's basically a last man standing match without the pinfalls. I know that a bunch of people dislike any kind of 10 count stip, and I don't hate them. I think they can be done well. But these matches and last man standing matches, they have a big trap that a lot of 10 count matches fall into. That being, if you do a lot of the long, slow, we nearly get to 10 counts in one of these matches, you slow the whole thing down. Because in a regular match, a pin attempt means you're basically 3 seconds away from a finish. So it's fast, it's dramatic and exciting. And even when wrestlers go for covers for moves early in the match that you know can't possibly be the finish, you don't really mind them going for a pin because it's going to be 1 or 2 seconds. But if you do a bunch of those same things where near falls, quote unquote, where everyone knows this move's not going to end the match, and it goes to like 7, 8, or 9, if you do a few of those, you're really slowing down the match for not much of a payoff. And where I think this stip can work is if you only do a few 10 counts, you do them late in the match, and you only do them for big spots that fans are going to buy as maybe being able to finish the match. So that those 10 counts that you do have actually have some suspense. You can't treat a last man standing match like a regular match where you have 7 near falls in the first half of the match, because if you did 7, 8, or 9 counts that no one buys, that's going to slow things down way more than 7 2 counts. So this match doesn't go to the bad extreme. There are some 10 counts throughout the match, including for stuff like Steen's cannonball into the corner that never wins a match, and so everyone knows it's not going to finish this match. But the earlier 10 counts or stuff like that generally aren't very long. They're not making the mistake of trying to milk every single 1 to 9. But as the match gets deep, we do get the longer 10 counts, and I do feel like it does sap a little bit of one of the strengths that Briscoe's matches of this era had, and this match had early on, which is that intensity and a fast go pace. Doing the 10 counts, that starts to break it up a bit. I feel like in a last man standing stip, you need to go way bigger than a normal match, and you can actually, because it makes logical sense that moves that might knock a wrestler out for 3 seconds won't knock them out for 10. So I feel like these 10 count matches are the rare stipulation that they actually justify wrestlers spamming finishers. But instead, I felt like they were bordering on restraint here, because they treat the end of this match just like a regular match that happened at 10 counts, because Steens hits his finisher, which is the package pile driver, 1 time. Jay barely gets up in time. Jay then very quickly hits his finisher, the Jay Driller, 1 time. Steen barely gets up in time. Then El Generico runs in. He hits the 2 leg kicks. Steen hits a second package pile driver, and we're done. And I feel like this is a match where you could have gone crazy with the near falls, and it would have not felt like spam because of the 10 counts. But anyway, I didn't love the interference from Generico at the end, because I feel like between Heroes Act, this feud, maybe I think we've seen a little bit of interference from the No Remorse core this year. I forget, but it feels like we're seeing more interference than we ever have before in ROH in 2007. And I'm not an absolutist. I don't mind a little interference in ROH, but I want it to be rare enough that it feels novel and not like a cop-out. And I feel like we're starting to get a little closer at this point to that line where they're just doing it because it's an easy out for stuff like this. And I also don't love Generico doing the interference, because the fun dynamic of Steen and Generico at this point is Steen is a heel, but Generico is basically a good guy who's just bullied by him. And this was Generico, by his own volition, doing something pretty asshole-ish, costing a guy a match, when there's no reason to. But overall, I thought this was a good match, but just good, like not even very good. It's a good match. They work hard. There's a couple nasty moves, like Steen basically razor edge lawn darting Jay into the barricade. I like how hot and heated they were at the start, playing into the fact that they hate each other. That's a feud. It's not that there isn't enough action in this match. There's a lot. And it's not that there isn't enough big moves down the stretch. There are. It's another match where I just wish they went a little more over the top, because this is a stipulation that kind of cries for you to be over the top.
Yeah, my opinion on this match is actually pretty much exactly the same as yours. I thought it had the weaknesses that you thought it had. I thought it had the strengths you thought it had. I'm comparing this to like the Steen versus Mark Briscoe match that I loved so much in June of 2007, and it didn't have like that degree. I did like how much Steen is talking about his mom on the show. There's a spot where Steen avoids a J driller and then hits a pump handle neck breaker and yells, "It's over, Mom." And then later on, while Jay is leaping off the top rope for a leg drop, Steen is yelling, "I want my mom. Where's my mom?" But then Jay hits the leg drop. So he's very mom focused. Maybe it was his mom's birthday and he was like, "I'm going to mention my mom as much as possible on this show." Yeah, no, I pretty much feel the same way. There were some really good big spots, like the wild like release German suplex that he hits on Steen at one point. There's the package pile driver spot. There's the J driller spot with the two the two near falls, I guess you'd call it. Did you notice that they never did a count that got past 8? Until the finish? I thought that was a little bit surprising that they never did like the real like last second near fall type of deal. I mean, it honestly shows restraint, because it's just like, all right, we're not going to go for that cheapness. Like we'll all get up at 8. But I was surprised, because you very rarely see a match like this where they don't at least go for a couple of like last second stand ups.
Yeah.
I do think there's been plenty of good like last man standing / modern Texas death matches, though. I think that's definitely a stip that you could have great matches with. I don't think they were totally going for that here. As far as the interference, I agree. I don't like the degree at which they're doing it, but I will say this. I am very happy that they have not, at this point, let it bleed into their title matches, like their tag team and world title matches. Those are still straight wrestling matches, I'd say 99% of the time. And that's been one of my big complaints about AEW, like pretty much going back very early on, which is just these world title matches, I think they should treat them as something special where you don't have all the bullshit until like after the match. But obviously that's AEW is not ROH, so that's just not how they play it.
Yeah, and I feel like interference is one of those things where it's like a drug in wrestling. Although in wrestling, the drugs are also
the drug. I'm gonna say drug in wrestling. I'm gonna say
Somas are the drug in wrestling.
Soma, cocaine. I listen, I don't know what the drugs of choice are now, but I'm gonna throw in our old friend anabolic steroids. I feel like
old friend.
I feel like that's a drug in wrestling, probably still now, I would say.
You know what I was thinking about the other day was like, do they even make Somas? Because that was a huge problem in wrestling
a while ago. In like the 90s.
And you never hear about Somas.
Into the 2000s. So yeah, I'm guessing it's probably something different now, but I don't actually know.
Yeah, so for maybe our younger listeners that probably weren't even aware, Somas were basically a like combination painkiller and sleep aid that get you high. And since wrestlers are in pain, have trouble sleeping on the road, and like to get high, they were very abused in the 90s, and more than a couple deaths. I think Somas played a pretty heavy factor into that, and you don't hear about them today.
It's a brand name for carisoprodol, and it's supposed to be used for the short-term treatment of discomfort associated with acute, painful musculoskeletal conditions. And I know that I've heard it described as like a muscle relaxer also.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Again, all things wrestlers would want and in some cases need, but unfortunately not good.
It seems like it is still on the market.
Yeah, so that's interesting because you don't hear about them anymore. And I was almost thinking, were they like, is this going to be like someone's going to do a wrestling movie in 20 years and they're going to be like the Quaaludes in The Wolf of Wall Street? Or someone's just going to be like, yeah, I got one of the 1997 Somas.
In 2019, it was the 343rd most commonly prescribed medication in the United States with more than 800,000 prescriptions in the United States. And it is also here a Schedule 4 controlled substance.
Huh. Maybe everyone's just like, you know what, fentanyl has made Somas look bad. No one.
I mean, I think that I'm going to say Soma a lot more safe than fentanyl, as it is something that doctors do actually prescribe.
Yeah,
I mean, I guess fentanyl was something doctors prescribed too at some point for pain. Right?
Yeah,
I don't know.
It was just something really prone to abuse.
Yeah, I guess it is still. I guess you could still prescribe fentanyl. I don't know. It's I don't know. I don't want to give misinformation about these highly dangerous and addictive opioid drugs.
Don't do any of these drugs. Don't, look up wrestling history from the late 90s. You don't want to do anything those people did. Anything those people did, do the opposite. Yeah. And also like you, I really noticed the, Kevin Steen, even the commentators were getting in on like Steen making all the mother references because they were like, Kevin Steen is fighting for his mama. And I just watched this and I thought, going back to like, if comedy catches on and wrestling, that can be bad for you sometimes. I felt like if he had done this kind of organically funny thing in the WWE, Vince would have seen that and he would have been his entire career.
Oh my God. He would have had a feud with Kevin Steen and his mother against Shelton Benjamin and his mother.
Exactly, with Mr. T as the referee talking about his mother.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah, that's the kind of thing. Thank God it doesn't catch on because even though it's funny in the moment, that is the kind of thing that some bookers would have seen and been like, "That's your thing now. That's all you're going to do now."
Yeah, I mean, she would have been the new Judy Bagwell.
Kevin Steen's mother on a pole. That doesn't sound good, actually. After the match, Mark Briscoe comes to the ring. And to continue, so this is why I talked about the ladder having a big payoff here. To continue the recent theme of the Jericho and Steen versus a Briscoe's feud, Mark brings a ladder to the ring. It is the tiniest ladder you've ever seen. Wee Man from Jackass would say this ladder was too short to suit like any need for him. It's hilarious, especially because Kevin Steen came out earlier with a full-size ladder that is not around here at this point. So why didn't they just reuse the same ladder? Like this ladder is like small for a step ladder. It is comically short.
They also use a ladder in the main event.
Yeah, I maybe that's why. I don't know. Maybe they were like, we only have one ladder that's full size, and we don't want to risk it at this point. But they risked it for the earlier segment. I don't know. But anyway, Steen and Jericho flee to ringside. So big is their fear of tiny ladder. But it is just it's worth watching this show for a lot of reasons. But just to see Mark Briscoe holding the tiniest ladder you've ever seen is one of the many reasons.
Is that going to be the thumbnail for the show?
It wasn't going to be, but I might have to grab it now. But Matt, that brings us to another good reason I would say to buy this DVD and watch the show, or find another way to watch it, because I just realized you can only buy the DVD on eBay at this point. But the ROH World Title match, Takeshi Morishima successfully defended the title when he defeated Brent Albright via pinfall in 15 minutes, 15 seconds after hitting a backdrop driver. Matt, how about this? This is another one of those kind of, both this and the Claudio match are kind of like dark horse fondly remembered matches of the era. I think.
Yeah. This wasn't as good as that one, because like just Claudio's so amazing, but definitely Albright approached it the same way, where he just was like, I'm going to be really aggressive here. They're going to go hot and heavy at the beginning, which a lot of Morishima matches start that way. Albright suplexed him early. They're trading forearms. There's a pretty clever spot near the beginning where, how Morishima in a lot of recent matches has been doing this thing where he clubbers his opponent in the corner and the referee tries to stop him, and Morishima shoves the referee out of the way. And Albright does the same thing in the role reversal this time, where Albright is pounding on Morishima in the corner and Sinclair tries to stop him, and Albright shoves Sinclair away, and the crowd gets on his side pretty big here. And at that point, like, Albright is just 100% babyface. Like, there's no shades of gray at all. Albright is doing a full-on gritty, like, determined underdog babyface role here, and he it slows down a bit in the middle when Morishima is working over Albright. There is a spot where early in the match where Morishima is attacking Albright on the floor and he tries to clothesline him and he accidentally clotheslines the post and then Albright goes to work on the arm to set him up for the crowbar. Although it never Morishima doesn't really sell it once he gets back on offense, so I wouldn't say it totally goes anywhere. And Morishima's offense is actually not getting that much heat, but like anytime Albright is on offense, the crowd goes nuts, which is interesting. It made me realize that in Morishima's matches, his selling is often the best part of the match, as opposed to his offense, which I think is actually pretty rare for a big dominant guy, especially one who can do the cool stuff that Morishima can do. But a lot of times when he's the one on the receiving end, that's when the match is most exciting. Which, I don't know if that speaks well of him or not. It probably does, but I thought it was cool. There's also one moment where the announcers go, Albright spends a lot of time in the gym, but Morishima is just a naturally large man, which I thought was funny because it's like, so if Albright, what would Albright be like a pipsqueak if he wasn't like a gym rat? I don't know, but
did you notice at one point on commentary they were saying what they said on the last show, which was Morishima's lost some weight, and I think they said something to the effect of he's realized he has to get in better shape. Something to the thing like he realizes he has to get in better shape to be champion. It's like he's held the title for a while and beaten a lot of major names. It's almost like they were kind of body shaming him in the middle of his title reign, which felt like a weird story to try and push.
Very weird. There was about midway through the match, Albright tries to hulk up a bit, and he hits a sudden power slam. And there's this really cool spot where Morishima tries his hip attack, his butt attack, but Albright catches him in midair and hits a German suplex, which is just such an awesome spot. And at that point, the match gets really, really good, and we start getting Albright ducking a lariat, locking in the crowbar, and Morishima makes the ropes, and gets the crowbar another time, and Morishima crawls to the ropes. Albright drags him back to the center and locks it back in, which gets a good pop. And that's when Morishima powers out and hits the first backdrop driver, which Albright kicks out of, which gets the crowd really into it. Big Albright chant breaks out. Albright hits a top rope superplex, but Morishima pops up, which he often does after a superplex. I feel like don't superplex Morishima. He just pops up afterwards. But Albright hits a half Nelson suplex after that, and Morishima pops up again. So Albright hits another one. And at that point, I'd say we get possibly the best near fall of the entire Morishima title reign. It's really last second kick out. The crowd goes nuts. They chant that was 3. And you can't understate how impressive it is that they got the crowd to totally believe and totally want Brent Albright to win the title here. It's very, very much an unexpected development, I would say. And Albright yells one more time because he's a total baby face. So of course Morishima blocks the third attempt, and he just hits a regular ass crossbody, which I thought was pretty funny from Morishima. And then Albright gets one more really exciting spot where Morishima hits the ropes, but Albright hits an over-the-head belly-to-belly suplex on Morishima, which I thought was really awesome. But then Morishima hits a sudden German suplex and a lariat, and Albright kicks out, and then another backdrop driver for the win. Those last couple minutes were incredibly awesome. The rest of the match wasn't, again, as good as the Claudio match, but I'd say possibly the down the stretch part might have been even better, the last 2 minutes. So I thought it ended up being a very, very good match. Definitely one of Albright's most memorable moments here. And honestly, probably one of the more memorable title defenses for Morishima.
I like this match, I think, a little tiny bit more than you, but I think I have the same, basically exact same thoughts in a lot of points as yours. So, like I was saying to start off, this match in some ways is very similar to the Morishima-Claudio match the night before. They're both Morishima versus a mid-card heavyweight. Morishima gets tossed around, like you said, and tested in a way he often hasn't been in ROH so far. They each have one huge near fall late. They both overachieve from a match quality and crowd heat perspective. And this is another match. There's been a few matches on this show that start, especially the Briscoes, Steen, and Generico matches that start hot with two guys wailing on each other. And from there, we get, I would say this match is the most Morishima has been on his back foot in his entire reign so far. He certainly gets some offense. You went over a bunch of it. But Albright, I would say, gets the majority of the offense in this match, like more than half of it. And if you like seeing Morishima get tossed around, definitely there's no match in Morishima's reign so far, and that might not end up being one that has more than this one, where Albright hits him with the hammerlock back suplex. I roll all these down. A power slam, a belly to belly. You mentioned that great spot where Morishima does his flying ass attack. Albright grabs it in midair and turns into a German suplex. And then the two straight half Nelson suplexes at near the end that you mentioned. And I wrote in my notes basically the exact same thing as you, which is that is the biggest near fall that Morishima's title reign has had thus far for those two half Nelson suplexes Albright does to him. And like you, I thought that is such a credit to these two guys, because I don't think at the start of the match this crowd was ready to believe that Albright had a chance to beat Morishima and to be that frothing at the mouth to want to see it. And by the time they get to that moment, that crowd believes he's about to win. And they want it so bad. It is such a huge near fall. And like you, I think that is a huge credit to both these guys that they built a match that got that out of the crowd on this night. And generally, just like Claudio in the match the night with Morishima the night before, I think you can tell this match is a big deal to Albright. I think you touched on that, where he's giving that extra effort and intensity. You can just, it's always fun when you can tell, when you watch a guy on a certain show and you can just tell, like right from moment one, like, oh, they're extra tonight. They can tell this is big for them. He's even doing things like he's taking Brent Albright, he's taking a rotating in the air bump off a lariat. I think one thing about this match that surprised me is often when two big guys wrestle each other, they kind of cancel each other out and make each of them, they make them each other look smaller, because they just kind of, it's two big guys, so they kind of look the same. But even though Albright is much bigger than most of Morishima's opponents in ROH, in this match, I feel like Morishima came off as even bigger than he normally does, because Albright is notably smaller than Morishima. Like I didn't really appreciate just how big Morishima was until he was next to Albright and noticeably bigger than Brent Albright, where I was like, holy shit, he is a really large man. And so yeah, I felt like it didn't cancel each other out this time. Morishima, I felt like he stuck to a lot of his match formula, including the random mid-match chinlock. But again, the story here, what's different is he gives Albright so much. I agree with you. He bumped really well for him. He's a really good bumper for a guy his size. I completely agree there. And at different times in this match, the crowd's jeering Morishima. I think at one point they were even chanting Baby Huey at him. But also sometimes they were doing dueling chants at a couple points in the match. So I feel like Morishima was in this interesting point in his reign at this moment, because for a while we were reading quotes from places like The Observer based on live reports David was getting, where it was like, Morishima's reign isn't quite catching on. But then right after those reports, it really felt like Morishima hit a new gear of match quality in his reign. And I think it's reflected in the crowd reactions in matches like this one, where the fans started out, it felt like at the start of this match, they wanted to hate him. But as the match went on, they still wanted Albright to beat him because it would have been a cool moment. But it felt like you were starting to get a few more of those dueling chants. It was like, and I feel like there's been a couple of matches like that recently where people maybe went in reading the recent hype of, Morishima's kind of not achieving, and then they start watching the match, and a few minutes in they realize, holy shit, actually, no, this guy's pretty goddamn awesome right now. He's having match after match.
I would say August of 2007 Morishima is possibly one of, if not the, like, I know this sounds crazy, and people will probably get annoyed if they listen and hear me say this, possibly the best month of matches for any ROH champion ever, at least up to this point.
I mean, he's getting matches like I'll say this, especially with ROH, usually the champions are matched up against top level opponents, and not that Brent Albright, as much as I pick on him sometimes, is a bad wrestler, but usually we don't get many matches like this from any ROH champion where they get this much. And Albright obviously deserves a bunch of the credit for it, but still, like, I can't think of many matches in ROH World Champion history, to your point, up in this point in the company's history, where a match overachieved this much, I would say.
Yeah, but when I'm saying this, think about what match is coming up also in August of 2007, which is the match of the year from the Observer, the match against Bryan Danielson at the Manhattan Center. That's also in August. And then another three-way match with Claudio and Brent Albright. That's all in August. Like he has a match on every single a title mat defense on every single August event, and they're all like really great matches or close enough. And one of them I think is high on the list of like best matches in ROH history. With Danielson. I mean, the only other champion I could think of that had a month like this, and it was 2 matches, not 3, but it was Samoa Joe in October of 2004 when he had the match against Danielson, and then Joe versus Punk 2 in the within a couple of weeks of each other, plus another good match against Rocky Romero. So it's in a whatever. Even if you don't agree with me that it's the best, elite tier month for any champion in terms of match quality.
Absolutely, I will say. There are flaws to this match, but a lot of them are nitpicks that we frequently had for different matches. Like, I know this match has one of your nitpicks, Matt, which is that in ROH, seemingly every match is no DQ when it's outside the ring, even if what they do is right in front of the ref, because this is another one of those matches where Morishima is on the floor with Albright, and he hits Albright with a chair in full view of the ref, and all he gets is Todd Sinclair, the ref, saying, "You knock it off," like a father mildly reprimanding a kid. Like, just him saying, "You knock it off," for some reason made me laugh. And then I felt like one of my pet peeves on commentary, which is Gabe, through the commentators, repeating a thing he did with Samoa Joe's reign, which is having the commentators that are starting with this match, it feels like, to say how the champ is really starting to feel the wear and tear from holding the title. And I know we talked about this during Joe's reign when they did this, and you didn't agree there, Matt, but I don't love that. I like emphasizing how hard it is to be champion, how hard it is to stay champion, but I feel like doing this hard sell of the champ getting worn down and vulnerable over his reign makes his eventual loss feel a little less valuable, like just a little bit, because to me, when a champ loses, I want you to be able to say he lost on his best day, so the other wrestler gets full value from that. And they're doing this thing, they're starting to do the thing they did with Joe, which is, oh, he's wearing down. Like, they're trying to almost hint to you, like, the reign's getting closer to the end than the beginning. He
right. I think in their mind it's not for the guy that beats him, but for like the drama of the guy, for the matches for the guys that don't. Like I get what you're saying, but I think like that's probably the reason they do it. They're like, oh, it'll add more drama to the defenses if we say he's weaker now, so someone like Brent Albright, who's not positioned as a main eventer, could possibly win. I think that's the idea, but I get why you would scoff at it. It is as far as commentary, like channeling Gabe on commentary, there's also a moment in the main event where that happens too, which we'll get to.
Yeah. I will say this. There is a moment on the Gabe Sapolsky did the book of ROH secrets or whatever, where after he got fired, he revealed what his booking plans would have been for the future for ROH. And he claims that his idea for the Nigel McGuinness world title run would have been to flip the script and do the opposite of what he did with the Morishima and Joe runs, which would have been that Nigel's actually getting stronger as the reign gets deeper, not weaker. So that would have been an interesting twist. But there's also the fact that you mentioned it, Morishima gets his arm worked over, but he doesn't really sell it much at all. It still plays into the fact that, it's weakening it for the crowbar, but it doesn't really, like you said, do much to him apart from that. But with those points aside, I would say this is outright a great match. You were talking about when you were talking about this match about, Morishima bumping more is like that a good thing or not. I think it's a good thing. I think what we're seeing during this reign is we're getting examples now of, I think the Morishima formula in ROH is being refined, where early in the reign, it felt like his matches were about Morishima's the monster who dominates matches, and he gives his opponent just enough to make his opponent look good and have a somewhat competitive match instead of just a squash. And now I feel like he's having more between this and the Claudio match. And even like the Shingo match, he's having matches like this where he's a monster, but he's a monster that takes a lot of punishment. And it doesn't matter because he's such a beast that if he hits you with 3 big moves in a row, he'll erase everything you've done to him. So he's like a monster, but a kind of strangely vulnerable monster. And I think that's worked better. And I think they've realized that works better for him. And, I would say you said the Claudio match was better, and I think I agree with what you said, which is I think the Claudio match is better bell to bell, but I think the better moment is the Albright near fall. Like you said, what's the best moment of either of these matches? It's the Albright near fall from the two half Nelson suplexes. I think that's the hottest peak of either of these matches. But if you're talking about which match is most consistent, I would say the Claudio match. But they're both, it is one of those things where I would say, if you pick either one, I wouldn't go you're crazy. If you said this was better as a complete match, I'd be like, okay, like I can understand that. If there's a better Brent Albright match, it's not coming to my mind, although I am not a Brent Albright scholar. But
there's one at the following year's Death Before Dishonor that I remember at least giving it a run for its money, but I guess we'll find out when we get there.
So, and kind of wrapping a bow on all of our thoughts here, Dave in The Observer kind of does a bit of a mea culpa to what we were just talking about, because Dave wrote in The Observer after this match, or this weekend, Takeshi Morishima has more than turned the corner as champion, having great matches with Claudio Castagnoli and Brent Albright, respectively. Both matches were built around a constant struggle by the challengers to do their big move, the Ricola Bomb and the Half Nelson German Suplex, respectively, but Morishima would keep blocking it because of his size. It builds to a great spot where they finally hit the move, and he kicks out of it at the last tenth of a second. The Morishima match was said to be excellent, and the Albright match was said to have been far better than it appears on paper. I love that, the kind of backhanded cough. Like, I kind of agree, but like, imagine if you're Brent Albright reading that, like, yeah, the Claudio match was great, and the Brent Albright match, well, it was better than you think a Brent Albright match would be. Like, hey,
yeah, but also true,
Yeah, it is true. It is true. Like the Claudio match being as good as it was is not as much a surprise as this was.
Right.
I think, like I said earlier, this was one of the real dark horse matches of maybe the entire run of Through the Years of that match was this good.
Yeah, I remembered it because I was there. You know what I mean? Like, I knew this was a great match, I would actually say, like, I probably liked it very, very, very marginally less than I liked it at the time. But, still obviously like really, really good. Yeah.
So, after the match, the commentary emphasizes how now Morishima is just barely holding on to the RH title in recent matches. Albright gets a big standing ovation and chant from the audience, so this was a big win for him from a performance standpoint and getting over with the crowd. And then we get one of our favorite recent features of ROH DVDs, an FIP ad that is incredibly outdated, because this is an ad for Unfinished Business 2007, a DVD they're just getting around to releasing in August, apparently, that took place January 13th. It seems to have a really sexy card from a name.
They should have called it Unfinished DVD, considering how long it took to come out.
This card didn't seem to have like a sexy lineup from a name value standpoint to a Ring of Honor fan. It had more of the FIP locals. So they emphasized the fact that you get both a dog collar match and a tables, ladders, and chairs match. And it's always funny to see these delayed FIP release trailers, because you get caught off guard as an ROH fan watching the trailers when you see things that are really outdated. Like, all of a sudden you're like, holy shit, Claudio has long hair again. Or, whoa, Jimmy Rave's back. Like, didn't we just say goodbye to him? And it's all, then you have to realize, it's from a show in January. It's 8 months old, but it's been a fun little thing to see. So, as always, that's our retirement plan, our big FIP. Matt can't wait to review FIP shows, but, that brings us to the main event, a Philadelphia street fight. Last night, the main event was the Boston street fight. And this is the No Remorse Corps of Davey Richards, Rocky Romero, and Roderick Strong, plus Matt Sydal, defeating the resilience of Austin Aries, Eric Stevens, and Matt Cross, plus Delirious, in 33 minutes, 52 seconds, when Strong made Stevens pass out in, I think, just a regular Boston Crab. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. I think this time they seem to just call it a Boston Crab and not the Stronghold. So, first off, this would have been the image for the show, Matt, but I couldn't find a good solo screen cap of it. But Matt Sydal has maybe the weirdest attire for a street fight that I've ever seen. He's got torn up, grungy ass looking jeans. Check. That's very appropriate for a street fight. But he's wearing a button up shirt that I think even the announcers make fun of later. And then he has some kind of little scarf or dickie. He has something around his neck. And then a big ugly towel hanging out of like the ass of his jeans, plus shin pads or pulled down knee pads that are right at his shins. And all of that combined, it's like the weirdest fucking street fight attire I've ever seen. And then when all four heels come to the ring, Aries is missing from his team's entrance, and that leads Rye to get on the mic and note and mention that. He's like, hey, if you guys didn't go on the computer, you might not know that we took Aries out last night, and now he's gone home like the coward he is, and he's probably called TNA trying to get his job back, which gets a couple oohs from the crowd. Of course, Aries then sneaks in the ring behind them with a cane. He attacks them all, and the match starts up, because even though he did legitimately hurt his ankle the night before, he works this match. And to be fair, this is a match that you can kind of scrape by with an injury, because it's a street fight where you're using props and stuff. Anyway, match itself. This might be the craziest match that we've ever seen on ThROH The Years. It's tough for me to say.
Wow,
sure.
wow, that is a bold statement.
Well, I'll say this, Matt, because it's tough, because there are a lot of ways a match can be crazy, and there's some matches have been more brutal than this in some ways, or more bloody, definitely, and things. But I'll put it this way. When I watch a match for ThROH The Years, and there's a super notable spot I want to remember to possibly talk about, I write it in my notes. And some matches I'll have no notable spots, just more themes and ideas. And some matches I'll have like 2 or 3 spots. This match has more spots in the notes than I've written, I think, for any match in the history of this podcast. Just notable things that made me think, that's crazy, that's notable. There are probably at least 2 big heap and handfuls of spots, I would say, in this match that on most other ROH shows up to this point would be the craziest spot on the entire show. The one that, fans would walk out of the building talking about. Probably 10 minutes into this match, they've done more crazy things than most matches I've seen. Like, this is one of those matches where I say I've said this before about a couple ROH matches. This is one of those matches where, in this case, there's 8 guys, and it feels like they just threw out a million ideas before the match, and no one said no to any of them. It feels like they did every single idea they had. Like, I literally have sorted the spots into categories. Like, there are insane athletic spots, like Matt Cross shoves Seidel off the bleachers so that they're flying on top of the bleachers onto a bunch of other wrestlers to catch him. Cross then runs and jumps, basically like wall walks or wall runs a little bit off the wall above the bleachers onto the wrestlers himself on the floor.
That spot was completely off the wall.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm so sorry.
Cross does that flagpole press where he's holding his body completely horizontally, but he does it off the production scaffolding to put Rocky Romero through a table. So just crazy athletic stuff from Cross. But then you get also, if you want to see like just the usual gimmick match, we're doing big bumps onto props. You get a ton of those too. Like Cross gets covered with a pile of chairs, and Davey Richards does a senton over the top rope onto him, covered with the pile of chairs. Delirious gets slingshotted into a ladder that's being held like at head level, so it looks pretty nasty. He gets his hands up to protect himself, though. Aries does back rakes with a literal rake that he brings. Roddy gets Cobra Clutch suplexed by Delirious onto a ladder. Delirious someone gets double stomped onto an open chair. Cross gets Fisherman busted onto an open chair. There's a TKO from Eric Stevens onto a ladder. Stevens power slams Richards off the apron through a table on the floor. And then one of the last spots of the match, Roddy basically, they call it a half Nelson backbreaker, but it's basically a Uranagi, a rock bottom on Stevens, off the top turnbuckle, through a ladder that's been suspended between 2 chairs. And then on top of all of that, you then have, this is not a good thing, a bunch of unprotected chair shots to the head and other spots that felt just outright dangerous. I mean, not just dangerous, but like outright reckless. And there's a spot where Seidel's climbing to the top turnbuckle. He wants to do a move to the floor, and he starts to slip, which I don't know if that was on purpose or not. And right after he slips, he's still trying to like gain his bearings. Delirious throws a chair at him from behind that Seidel isn't looking for, which I thought that could have been so dangerous. It seemed like it went off fine. Then later, Delirious is standing on a table that's been set up in the front row of the crowd, and Seidel jumps off the top turnbuckle into a crossbody on Delirious, but he's way wide, so Delirious basically has to reach out and kind of catch him so he doesn't kill himself. And then this, I would say, is the craziest spot of the match. Eric Stevens often does this move where he runs off the apron and then jumps off the apron and does this like flying shoulder tackle to an opponent on the floor. He tries that here to Roddy. Roddy has a chair and he hits Eric with the chair shot mid-air so hard in the head. That's the part where I was like, that I know Roddy and Stevens were friends, and they've talked about how, like, you often in wrestling are harder on your friends than non-friends because they'll understand, you can apologize to them later and they won't think you were trying to really do something. But that spot, and then there's another spot where Roddy throws a ladder at Stevens' head that both felt like, if you told me that Roddy hated this guy and was taking advantage of him, I would have believed you, because they feel like not just border, like they don't just feel reckless. They feel like there are moves where, like, oh, that could have been safe, but it turned out kind of reckless. Those are moves where it's like, there is no way that could have gone not insanely bad for Eric Stevens.
Yeah, well, wait, the first one didn't give Stevens a concussion, and then the second one, it was after he was already badly concussed?
Yeah, I gotta look. I'll just scroll through my notes, but in fact, if I look down, PW Insider wrote, Eric Stevens was knocked loopy during the Philadelphia street fight Saturday night, but was ruled negative for a concussion, which, by the way, is such a 2007 reporting thing, because in the first years of Through the Years, we've seen so many reports in the newsletters where, oh, this guy got knocked really bad, but turns out he doesn't have a concussion. You don't see those reports anymore, because I think people realize how dumb it sounds to basically say someone got hit so hard they, like, forgot where they were or something, but they don't have a head injury.
I know.
I think they said that about the famous Dan Moff knockout from Low Key, where it's like, he didn't have a concussion. He was fucking unconscious. What do you think happened? He got hit in his brain so hard, his brain stopped working. I don't care what you want to call that. That is a trauma to the brain. That's the only way that happens. But anyway, that's a pet peeve of mine. So this is a very different match in the like a fight in the crowd match in the Briscoe-Steen Generico match the night before, where that match they spent a lot of time in the crowd and then they had the last third or whatever in the ring. This one starts in the crowd early, but instead of just in the front few rows of the crowd, they go all the way to the back of the building onto the bleachers, and then they come back to the ring. Then a couple guys go back into the crowd, but also the difference is the Briscoes versus Steen Generico match the night before was, I think the selling point of that was consistency, where it was bell-to-bell action with no downtime. This match has a ton of action, but you do have some instances, mostly early, of just random, I guess I need to do something, like generic brawling, and it does slow down greatly in the final minutes. It's also a match where a lot of it is 2 to 4 guys doing spots in the ring, as guys at ringside basically just watch the match or do mild busy work until it's their turn to get in the ring and do their spots. But the spots are huge. They're fucking insane. But I'm just saying, compared to the Briscoes match, where I felt like all 4 of those guys were doing something notable almost every second. They this match is more the big fireworks show of occasionally there's a lull, but there's like 30 giant explosions. And the other difference, I'll wrap this up by saying the other huge difference between this match and that match would be the ending. This match makes a real choice, and that choice is, after almost half an hour of just insane moments from 8 guys, it basically ends as a singles match between a fatigued Roddy and Eric Stevens. Seidel and Delirious brawl to the back. They're never seen again. Cross and Romero go fight in the back of the building. They never get back to the ring. Something happens to Davey that I didn't catch. And then Aries is just crawling around at ringside selling his ankle that is hurt. And what Roddy and Stevens do in the ring is by no means bad. They lay into each other. There's that huge top rope Uranagi and the ladder spot near the finish. It just feels like a completely different match than the rest of the match. And while the crowd, I would say they appreciate it, they're not freaking out or loud for it like they were for the rest of the match. I feel like the idea of, we do this insane 8-person gimmick match where you see every gimmick spot and crazy stunt imaginable, and it ends with just 2 guys in the middle of the ring going toe to toe. There's a way you could do that would feel absolutely epic. And that would be, I would say, like at the end of a long feud that the fans are really invested in. But that isn't the case here, because this isn't the end of the Roddy Stevens feud. In fact, in some ways, it's just getting warmed up. And while these two have this history in Florida and a prior friendship, all of that's been barely touched on ROH. And so I imagine that most of the fans here are either unaware of that or not that invested in it. So instead of feeling like this cool epic ending, it feels more like this big style and pace shift right at the very end of the match. And again, what these 2 guys do together is good, but in a different world, this would have felt like the blow off to something that, like, oh, finally these 2 are going to settle everything. And it's not that. But I would say this is a great match for what it is. It comes with the caveat that I sometimes give for gimmick matches like this, which is it's not going to be for everyone. It is that fireworks show. It's about seeing a million insane things and nothing else. If you're looking for anything else, any kind of nuance, you're not getting that here. There's a little bit of storytelling here, maybe, but not much. It's not a big payoff for anything. It's an isolated bright spot in a feud I have plenty of problems with, which I'll get to in a little bit later. And some of the spots, like I said, I think cross the line to irresponsible and outright uncomfortable to watch. But if you just want a match with crazy shit in it, if you like that, I would say, again, do I think this is the craziest match in ROH history? I'm not sure. I think it is the match with the most crazy things in it that we've seen on Through the Years.
I would say, first of all, you might have, you probably wouldn't notice, but I did, that in an early spot where Matt Sydal and Matt Cross are brawling in the bleachers, you could see me in the background. I
did not notice that.
Yes, I am there at the beginning of the match. But, yeah, I'd say, like, the first 2/3 of this match are, like, spectacular. I would almost describe it as, like, a proto version of Anarchy in the Arena. Where, like, every time they're cutting to somebody, like, some new crazy thing is happening and the crowd's going nuts for all of it. And I think, not only did Brett Albright have, one of his best nights in ROH, but so did Matt Cross. This match, Matt Cross was really in his element here. Like, he just, like, his intensity was good. He's obviously had those 2 really big, like, flying spots that he did. And I think, like, just he came off great. I think, like, once everyone got back in the ring, they did a great job keeping it, like, fast-paced, like one big move after another, and the crowd's going nuts for all of it. I will say that what took the match down for me was, first of all, I think that whole sequence with Stevens and Strong was marred by the fact that Stevens was not all there. Like, he was, from what I understand, I'm pretty sure he's said that even. So he still did a really good job, especially considering that, but it wasn't all it could be. But also, the way it was booked bothered me in the sense of, like, it got down to the one-on-one match, but the announcers never explained what happened to everybody else. Like,
no,
they never really acknowledged that Delirious and Sydal brawled to the back. There was a spot where you saw Aries, like, crawling to the entranceway, and they never like, even mentioned it. And it was like, why is he doing that? And you don't see him again until basically, like, right at the very, very, very end of the match. They show him on camera. At one point, I think maybe even to cover a spot because you heard the crowd reacting, they cut to just Romero and Cross doing, like, random brawling by the bleachers. And it's like, were they doing that the whole time? Did they go somewhere? Like, it was just like, it was very confusing. It got down to the two guys, and they don't explain where everyone else went, and, like, the cameras don't do a good job explaining it either. And that just was very odd to me, and it kind of distracted me. And I think even right before they got to the spots where with Stevens versus Strong one-on-one, there was a bit of a sense that, like, maybe they weren't so clear about what to do. Like, maybe they were, like, sort of, like, patching things together a little bit, whereas, like, that first 20 minutes was so tight and constant and nonstop. So, like, the tonal shift, like, I think took the match down a decent amount to where I would say, like, this was, like, and a lot of the match was really fucking great, like, incredibly great. And then the last part of the match was, like, good to very good. So I don't know what that evens out to, but I do think there was some weirdness involved. But yeah, you're totally right. Like, there was so much craziness, and everybody really put themselves on the line. I thought Aries did a really good job of, like, doing the best he could with a very real leg injury. He obviously didn't do a lot of his own flying stuff. I'm sure if he was at 100%, we would have seen, like, the heat-seeking missile and the 450 and all that stuff. But instead, he was just kind of, like, walking around brawling and hitting people with stuff, which is, he took some big bumps himself, but he certainly wasn't doing everything he could do. And so that was one missing element in the match. But they really did allow Stevens and Cross to shine here. So when you say, like, Stevens versus Strong at the end, like, could have been, like, the ending of something, I think what they were probably really going for was, like, a coming out party for Stevens.
Yeah.
Like him going toe to toe with Strong, even though he was not the leader of the unit. Now, would that have been different if Aries was 100%? Would he have been the one in there with Strong at the end? I don't know. I'm guessing not, but I also have no idea. But I do think, the idea was to give Steven a chance to step up. I think he did as best he could given the circumstances, but from what I understand, he was not 100% during that sequence.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with you. I think this match was clearly built to make Stevens looked good in losing. Maybe this was even hard way blood, but if not, I think that he's the only guy in 8 people in this match that bleeds, which I think, again, was probably, if that was purposeful, that was probably by design, to really kind of sell his struggle. But a couple other spots I want to bring up. At one point, Aries does the fucking stroke to Roddy on a ladder. Like, I love that. It didn't quite get the reaction that soon giving people the pedigree would get on the indies, but, like, I love that he's being that petty to TNA.
Yes,
like, I'm going to do the fucking stroke. And I love that nowadays, like, people wouldn't even be like, yeah, Jeff Jarrett's cool. But, like, back then, it was a little bit, like, yeah, fuck this guy.
A real side note, a very admirable rehabilitation of your reputation among hardcore fans by Jeff Jarrett over the past decade.
Yeah. Turns out when you're, like, a really good worker and you just don't insist on being on the main event when you're for years of kind of blandly bad, like overly booked matches, then people are like, oh, they appreciate you for what you actually have done. But then there's also did you notice there's that spot where Davey goes for his big springboard kick on Stevens, and while Stevens is holding a chair, he's supposed to kick it into Stevens' face, and Davey completely whiffs, and Stevens did think good on his feet because the fans are trying to laugh, and Stevens just immediately throws the chair at Davey, and that cuts off the laugh.
Oh, you think that was covering for a botch? I thought that was the planned spot.
See, I thought that was like him because, well, see, I'm not 100% sure, but I was guessing that he just was trying to kick it into Stevens because Stevens was holding it just right, but like probably because that's different than just him kicking someone like in the arm or something. He was a little off on it, but maybe it was planned. If it was planned, that's a next level thinking to go that far, to be like, and again, that would be playing into what we talked about earlier, which is Davey Richards as the buffoon who just completely eats shit on a move.
That's why I thought it, because I thought it was just totally like Stevens just like smartly didn't go forward for the move, so he didn't get kicked, and then he threw the chair. But yeah, your analysis could be plausible as well.
And the one other funny thing I thought was the Briscoes Steven Generico street fight the night before. They did that match with no commentary, and they had Prazak and Leonard say at the start of the match, "Oh, we got to get out of here. It's coming over here." And so they for whatever reason, they decided this match we want them to commentate. And so they realized they had to come with something. So they were like, I think Leonard says, "We're in a much safer broadcast position tonight, so we can call this match." So he knew how weird that would be for people like us that were watching both shows. Like, why are you calling this one? So I appreciate he went to the effort to be like, well, he doesn't say where they are because of course they're nowhere there, but like we're in a safe place.
And the spot where I thought they channeled Gabe, or obviously Gabe told him, is when Stevens came off the ropes with the attempted shoulder tackle and Strong chucked the chair in his face, and Leonard's like, he might have gotten a concussion right there. And I was like, oh yeah, that's one of those spots where Gabe's like, oh yes, there's an injury, and I know about it, so I'm going to pretend that I perceived it.
That takes me back. I guess probably because Gabe hasn't been doing the commentating, but I remember you probably have called out like 4 or 5 of those in the first couple of years of ROH on the podcast.
It was pretty common, yeah.
It's weird that we've now done this long enough that I'm getting nostalgia for a different era of the podcast. Like I was like, yeah, I remember when you used to point that out all the time.
Oh yeah, I very much have like nostalgia for an era where we could spend a lot of time making fun of things the announcer said. Leonard and Prazak are just too inoffensive.
Yeah, exactly. So our old friend Doug Welks, in his PW Torch live report from the show, he pointed out something, and this is the thing I've talked about before, where we did the kind of darkly sad and funny man on woman violence streak, but counter. But if this is not a streak, but I wish we had kept a counter of this because it has happened way more times than I thought. So this is from Doug Welks' live report. At one point during the match, Strong tossed a chair at Delirious and it hit a fan on accident who seemed to be hurt pretty bad. ROH officials ran over to see if she was okay. How many times have people in ROH in the last 2 or 3 years alone gotten hurt by thrown chairs? Because it must be at least 4.
I know. Seriously, it's really bad to throw chairs when there's just innocent spectators around.
They are lucky someone didn't sue them because it happened at least a handful of times now.
We don't know for sure that no one sued them either.
Yeah, I mean, well, there was that one time they sent Jack Evans to the girl
Yes,
and gave her some like free T-shirts.
Your favorite, one of your favorite anecdotes, I think.
I love the idea that just like, Jack, you got to talk to this girl for half an hour so she doesn't sue us. Like, I don't know, that is such a wrestling thing. But Dave Meltzer wrote in The Observer, the match, which went 36-46, was built around a Japanese style of making Stevens the underdog who kept surviving to get him over, but he ended up losing to the Stronghold. And this is the classic era of The Observer where everything was Japanese style or MMA style.
Now, hold on. Now, did you time it at that same time, 36-46?
Well, I usually use Cage Match, and then as I'm watching the matches, I kind of keep not a stopwatch or anything. I'm no Green Lantern fan, but I'll make sure to note if Cage Match is off, and usually they're right dead on, but occasionally they are off by like a minute or two. But just scrolling up, I'll see what I had for Cage Match for what they said. Was this another match with an edit?
Well, this is what I am positing, and I'll explain in a minute once you find the number.
Come on. 33:52. So yeah, that would be like 3 minutes shorter. It went 33:52, and
so
36 something.
So here's my memory, because I don't remember if I even watched this on video. Like I got the DVD, but I don't know if I ever like watched it again. But I remember the Stevens vs. Strong segment being like uncomfortably long and being like, this is kind of going on a while, and it did not come off that way on video. And I wonder if they edited some stuff out to cover. Like I am not positive about that. But I feel like that might have happened.
Well, we know they did some real surgery on the show elsewhere, so maybe they thought, well, why not just keep going? Let's fix some other stuff. But that's interesting. And people might go, how would Dave, who wasn't at the show before the DVD even comes out, have these specific times? Well, Green Lantern fan would literally time the matches on a stopwatch and send them to Dave. So I trust Green Lantern fan. If he says it was 36:46. I trust it was 36:46. So
and it does align with my memory of that part of the match being longer.
Yeah, I was going to say that in turn I think backs you up, your memory. So before we wrap up, I have kind of a rant because as for the booking of this match, I want to talk about that just for a second because I think this is the match where the No Remorse Core Resilience feud crosses the Rubicon and any chance of it being salvaged ends. And you might think, well, like Trevor, didn't you just say you thought this match was great? And isn't that a high point for this feud? And doesn't that mean things are looking up for it? And I would say the problem is this. This is another one of those things I've talked about a lot lately where it's in 2007, it seems to come up a bit more now of Gabe Sapolsky ideas that are good ideas with bad execution. And three founding members of ROH's most beloved stables, Generation X, they split up, they each found their own stables, and they started a three-way feud. I think that's a really cool idea. I've said that before. Roddy as the heel, forming a stable with two already established guys in Davey and Rocky, and then in turn, Aries picks two rookies that are just trying to break into ROH like they all were when Generation Next formed, and he promises to train them up to get them to that level. I think that's a cool idea too. And I think that not only is that a cool idea, that's a cool idea with a very obvious booking path for that, which would be the heel group being three established guys. They dominate the babyface group that's one established guy and two rookies at first, but then the rookies start to improve. And then by the end of the feud, the rookies have risen to that new level. They prove they belong in ROH and they beat the established heels. But instead, here are the heels. They beat the faces early in the feud. Aries has to leave for a short time. They get beaten even more. Granted, Aries being gone for a little while was out of ROH's control. But then he returns, and hey, now you think, okay, the loss is going to stop. This is where they turn things around. Except the first show after they return, all three members of the Resilience lose their matches, with Aries even being the first elimination in a four-way for some pointless shock value that goes nowhere. And then on shows after that, okay, Stevens gets to win a relatively meaningless scramble. Then Cross gets to win a relatively meaningless scramble. And then Aries and Stevens beat the No Remorse Core the night before in a tag match where the faces got beaten up most of the match. So that brings us to this match where on commentary during this main event, Dave Prazak seems to hint multiple times. I was kind of shocked that this is possibly a blow-off for this feud because he keeps saying things like, this is the kind of match that may be able to settle the war between these two factions. So I was like, did Gabe think this was like the blow-off? Because it isn't. But so anyway, you think that, okay, if this is where it ends, with this is going to be the faces winning. This is still a deeply flawed feud, but it's going to end on a high note with the right result. Except no, the heel wins by beating the prized prospect with no help, about as definitively as you can get, makes him pass out in his finisher. And so you go, okay, maybe this is building up an even bigger babyface win later. No, this feud, Matt, I mean, I know this, but for you at home that aren't keeping up, this feud's going to end a few shows from now with these two stables doing a best-of-3 singles match series, and the faces aren't just going to lose that series 2-1. The rookies are going to be the two losses. And then shortly after that, if my bad memory serves me, Aries, who founded this group, basically says, I'm gonna focus on the world title now, and you're on your own. So this whole feud is the babyface trying to develop two prospects to beat the heels. The heels beat them most of the way, including all the biggest matches, and then the veteran babyface who founded the group tells the rookies, "I give up. I gotta do me." And then remember this, Matt. The other neat idea, the 3 stable feud. At this point, the No Remorse Core Resilience feud is winding down, and Jack Evans still hasn't started his stable yet. So apart from, we're going to get an Aries Strong Roddy 3-way match in 2 shows, but apart from that, there is no 3-way feud. In fact, the Roddy Jack singles feud is almost over because the next show, it's going to be their 4th and final singles match this year that they've had just the last few months. So it's a weirdly mistimed thing. So I don't know anything that went on backstage, but this match to me is a big signal of Gabe giving up on this feud and giving up on the resilience and trying to salvage something from it. And how he's going to salvage it is he's going to put Aries back in the main event scene. He's going to, have him by the end of the year doing stuff with Danielson and McGuinness. He's going to eventually try and push Eric Stevens. He's going to let the No Remorse Core win this feud to give them some momentum heading into the Vulture Squad or whatever else they do. And he's going to let Matt Cross slowly fade away into oblivion. And I just don't believe that when Gabe started faction warfare, that this is what he originally planned. This feels like him pivoting and giving up on something. And overall, I thought this was just this booking, we've reached the point where I think it's pretty clear. This is a pretty unsatisfying execution of some cool ideas. I know it's a big rant.
Well, I was going to say, which is sad, because I do think the No Remorse Core itself, like on its own, turned out to be, from what like a pretty good group. Like, I think they have a good dynamic together. I think they are over as heels. I think that, like, they're fun. I think the resilience, obviously, like, we don't have to, like, rub salt in the wound. Like, it didn't go very well, right? Like, I think the problem is the booking of the resilience. The No Remorse Core on its own, like, independent of the feud that they were booked in, I actually think are quite good. And
they're a good floating mid-card, upper mid-card heel stable. There's nothing wrong with them. I completely agree.
Yeah, I think, certainly I think Matt Cross was miscast and he certainly wasn't booked well. I think this was his peak, absolutely, in ROH. He's gone before the end of the year, like, right? Yeah. Like, and Stevens, they get some good stuff out of Stevens, and Stevens, I think, did get over to an extent, despite, losing a lot until very recently. Aries being in and out didn't help, of course, but yeah, I think that even if he had been there, it just wasn't the right dynamic, and they didn't approach it the right way. I think, I don't know what they could have done differently. Maybe just instead of Gabe picking, like, his favorites that, like, he thought, like, could have a chance, like, maybe instead picking, like, people that were on the cusp of, like, breaking through, like, already, and putting them with Aries. I don't know. Like, I don't know if I would say Eric Stevens and Matt Cross were the equivalent of 2004 Austin Aries and Jack Evans, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And getting even to the Vulture Squad, and nothing against these guys either, because I like them, but Jigsaw and Ruckus are not the equivalent either. And
yes, although I was very excited to see Ruckus when he showed up.
Yeah. In fact, that's who I believe Homicide was wrestling this night after he stopped by at ROH for CZW. So, yeah, and I guess last thing I want to say is, like what Dave said, the whole point of this was to make Eric Stevens look good. And I feel like in one way, it's very smart booking the idea that Eric Stevens is going to lose these big moments clean to Roddy, but we're going to build up to a match at the very end of the year where he finally, Roddy's going to be this mountain he has to climb and overcome. He's finally going to do it in ROH. But I think the problem is that booking is satisfying and makes sense from a Stevens-Roddy feud, but from a Resilience No Remorse core feud, right after they were going to be like, oh, the Resilience has back to full power, they're going to turn this around, to lose a match this big the way they did, I feel it's unsatisfying in that context. It would have worked better if it wasn't part of this larger stable feud that isn't going great. But anyway, after the match, Aries checks on Stevens as Strong exits to the crowd. The crowd choo-choos for Stevens, and Aries encourages the crowd to give Stevens even more of a reaction, which they do with a big Eric Stevens chant. Aries raises Stevens' arm, and the two of them leave together. And like you were saying earlier, Stevens looks partly exhausted, probably partly effed up, from a not concussion. But either way, each of them have to be held to the back by ROH students. And then Aries does this thing where when they get back to the curtain, Aries poses to the crowd like he won the match. And I get trying to rile up the crowd and be like, but no one cheated to beat them. And he's almost like celebrating a little too much. Like, you shouldn't be that pumped. You lost very definitively. You got your asses kicked. But anyway, that is Death Before Dishonor 5 Night 2. Who wins a trophy that will never get broken? The Matt F trophy.
Well, I feel like you have to give it to Brent Albright, right? Like, when else is he going to even have a chance to win the Matt F trophy? This was his night. I thought that was. I don't know which of the two matches at the end I thought were the best match. I think probably that one overall. Like, if I was going to watch one again, possibly just because it's shorter. But this was a pretty memorable performance by Albright, a very memorable night for him, and a great performance by him. So I think he deserves it.
Yeah, and I mean, again, if I was doing a Brent Albright compilation, or if you're doing the classic old wrestler thing of put one match on DVD, one promo, and one highlight video. I know, like you were saying, we might find one match that might fight for that spot, but this is a top contender, I would say, if he was doing like a audition tape of the match to put on. So as for the show itself, I really needed this show and the last show, because I feel like I've been kind of grumpy about modern wrestling, and I felt like we had just gone through a string of 4 shows between the Japan shows and the Race to the Top tournament shows, where none of those shows were bad. Maybe the closest was the Osaka show, but they all felt like they underachieved their potential in different ways. And I feel like we got on this weekend just back to 2 really good ROH 2007 style, shows where good undercards, maybe not everything is quite as good as you'd hope, but a lot of good stuff, a couple big great matches at the end. And I really like how this weekend worked, where both nights you got like the double main event was similar, but yet different, because you could argue again, like we did, that Claudio Morishima and Brent Morishima have similarities, but they're also different in significant ways. And the same thing, that both nights ended with these wild main event street fights, but they're also, again, very different matches in different ways. So I think it's worth watching both these shows. I think this is a really good show. But even if you just watched the double main event of the last show and the double main event of this show back to back, I think that's a fun experiment just to see how it's like the same menu served up 2 different ways.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's funny, on this show, I think I like the undercard more than you. You like the main events like very slightly more than me. So I think it balances out. I thought this just was a super solid, like, this is what I like about ROH 2007. It's just like there's the dullness of some of the old undercards and like parts of 05 and 06. It's pretty much gone. Like, it's just like everyone's working hard. Like the matches are pretty hard work oriented, up and down. They're not all equally good, but they're all like pretty dynamic. I think this was just like, whatever you think about the booking, I think this was a very good era for ROH in the ring.
Yeah.
And I think these 2 shows are good exemplifications of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that brings us, that doesn't bling us. I sadly don't bling very much, but through the years at gmail.com is our email address, THROH, spelled the same way. You see it on your phone right now. At Trevor Dame on Twitter, at Mayor MGF on Twitter. We're also on Blue Sky under very similar handles. And next time on the show, we will be covering Caged Rage. ROH is bringing their steel cage to god dang Hartford. and they're going to do 2 of their feuds. And we're going to get Roddy and Jack in a cage, and we're going to get the Briscoes and Steve Generico in a cage. So
it's funny that they're doing the Jack Evans, Roderick Strong cage blow off before Jack Evans introduces his stable, but sure, fine.
Yeah, that's insane. That basically, just like the Resilience feud's basically almost over, the Jack Evans Roddy feud ends on the next show, and he hasn't started his stable yet. So yeah, well, that should be another really interesting show. Maybe not remembered as fondly as this one, but it'll be interesting to see if that's the case. Why? So until then, until next time, have a good time. Have a great time.